Oh, baby. It's another event. This is a very special one. This one is, this tonight's event is very special to me. Mostly because recently I've been doing a lot of interviews, having a lot of different people on my platform. But it all started with Bitcoin debates. Like, not a lot of people know that. It started with the Bitcoin debates. And I was like, I kind of like just fucking listen to other people talk. And I get to ask them questions. Like, this shit is kind of fun and cool, right? And it all started with the Bitcoin debates. So, you know, like a year later from, you know, all of that, debate pops up on my timeline. Altcoins versus Bitcoin. And it's grifting season. So, you know, I was like, hey, I'd love to host that. And these two gentlemen, you know, definitely decided to represent for their side. We got Vin Armani. He's representing the altcoins. Heavy in the BCH side. And we got Guy Swann. He's representing Bitcoin maximalist. For my Bitcoin maximalists out there. He's repping Bitcoin. How we're going to do this is very simple. It's jailhouse style. We're going to let Guy Swann go first. We did the flip. Y'all didn't see the flip, the coin flip. We did a coin flip off air.
And I called it.
He called heads. Vin won.
And got it wrong.
It was tails. Yes, correct. It was tails. Vin made Guy Swann go first. So Guy Swann is going to open for Bitcoin maximalists, ladies and gentlemen. And then Vin Armani is going to respond. Each side gets 60 to 120 seconds. In their opening introductions, and then we're just gonna let them start slugging from there on out. I'm gonna be referee tonight. Please no hitting below the belt. Guy Swann, you are on the clock. State your case for Bitcoin maximalists.
All right, sounds good. First, Vin, good to actually talk to you, man. Used to actually listen to your show quite a bit before I started my own podcast, and then I just stopped listening to podcasts mostly. No time. Yeah, so the Bitcoin maximalist position, I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist because I think, Bitcoin is like there shouldn't be competition and that there shouldn't be altcoins. I think some people probably hold that position. But I am a Bitcoin maximalist because I think the end game of the competition and the weighing of the value between all of these separate networks puts Bitcoin in a incredible lead. And that's because, and I think the major fundamental difference in perspective is that this is about, at least from the altcoin perspective, and in a general sense, is that this is about a really broad functionality at the blockchain layer, really cheap payments, and just really easy. I'm just going to point and shoot, and everything's just going to go. And I don't think that's what the core value proposition of this technology is. I think this is a cryptographic system for guaranteeing a set of property rights. This is about creating a way to own something that is wholly out of control of any other party, any other government, any other political institution or court or anything. And that if that is not solid as an absolute rock, if it is not streamlined and able to get across any firewall in the world, and if it doesn't have a broad, resilient infrastructure, it doesn't survive. It loses trust. And if it loses trust, it loses all of its value. And from that, we can build anything we want on top of it. But that's the fundamental value case for Bitcoin. And I think nothing else really comes close.
I don't know if ladies and gentlemen, if you're paying attention, but when Guy Swann stated his case, Vin Armani was like, oh my God. I have a feeling that Vin automatically has a rebuttal for that. I'm going to ask Vin not to state that rebuttal right now, because I know you got it. Just state your case for altcoins, please.
Okay, so my case for altcoins, as it were, is more a case that altcoins should be placed within Bitcoin as Guy has described it. So I have obviously some rebuttals and some arguments against what the value proposition is that he's presented, because I don't think that it's that. But even if I take that a given, and I would say, okay, that is the value proposition. There's basically, we first have to decide, like, what is Bitcoin and what is altcoins? I think that's the first thing that my opening is going to be. So it's like, what gets included inside of Bitcoin? And I think that is the crux of a lot of the argument, especially between like the Bitcoin Cash camp, let's say, and the Bitcoin SV camp and the Bitcoin BTC camp. And so it's on 3 levels. And I think that we're going to be talking on 3 levels tonight. And so people should be aware that there's not just one level that we're talking about. The first level that we're talking at, the closest analog I could have is if we were going to have a discussion about like Christianity versus everything else. This would be the first level, which is, I think, what most maximalists are speaking at, which is like by church. So like Catholic Church means universal church. To a Catholic, the only Christianity that exists is the Catholic Church. If you're not a Catholic, you're not a Christian. And for BTC maximalists, it's like, if you're not associated with BTC, you're not Bitcoin at all. For me, that discussion is not really very interesting. And for most people who are not in on the inside baseball, it's very boring. It's kind of like somebody who's not into basketball sitting at a bar and listening to 2 people say, well, what's the better team throughout history? Is it the Lakers or is it the Bulls? And it's like, we can both make arguments on either side, but it's like, no. Then the second way that we're going to look at this, and this is where I think Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin are combined, and then maybe there's some others outside like Ethereum per se, is basically like the protocol. And it's the protocol piece of the white paper. And it's to say, like, there's proof of work, there's mining, this is at a very high level, there's a blockchain, there's a transaction format that uses this language, internal language for locking and unlocking, that's called script. And that script has some certain codes in it. And then, there's all of these things. And at that level, Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, BSV, even Litecoin, Dash, Smart Cash, Zcash, these would all be Bitcoin. And this would kind of be, if we were to make the analog of Christianity, this would sort of be like Catholics, Lutherans, and all of that against, let's say, Islam or Judaism. And they would be like Christianity versus all the things that aren't Christianity. But the Lutherans are included. Maybe even we include the Mormons, right? Maybe. That would be kind of like Zcash, okay? So because it has a lot, it's almost the same, the way that the transaction structure works, the mining, the proof of work. Then at the highest level, we might be talking about something like monotheism, to take it with the Christianity. And it would be like Christianity versus something like Shinto. And in that way, it's like Christianity is tied in with Judaism, and even Islam takes some things from Christianity. And at that level, it would be Bitcoin, and the altcoin would be like central bank digital currencies, which are based on a lot of the ideas of Bitcoin, private blockchains, the way that they track, all of those things. And so it's like, we've got to talk at the different levels. Generally, the level that I'm talking about, since I work in this is what I'm devoted to. I'm a developer. It's what I spend all day doing. It's what I spend all day thinking about. It's what all of my friends are. It's what we do.
Yeah.
For the most part, I'm generally at the second level because I can move between Bitcoin-based blockchains pretty easily. There's very little difference between them at a real fundamental level. But at the philosophical level, that's really where Bitcoin is important. What is the problem that Bitcoin is solving?
10 seconds.
And that's where we get into his value prop. I think when we start talking about what Bitcoin is solving, that I think that's where we see that there's not that much difference between the coins.
Wonderful. Guy Swann, you mentioned owning coins. Are you familiar with Vin Armani's take on the owning of coins?
I don't think so.
I just wanted to warn you because the slug is coming for that one. I just wanted to warn you because he be tweeting about that. So I just wanted to give you a fair warning. But did you want to rebuttal anything that Vin Armani said before he?
I would probably say that, like, in a general sense, he's right. The interaction with all of these, all the altcoins, like, it's fundamentally the exact same thing. I mean, it's like VHS and Betamax. Like, they're both like cartridge tapes with a magnetic strip inside of them that hold a video. And a lot of these behave. I mean, a lot of them are in a sense, variations of a copy paste of the Bitcoin system. You know, their proof of work. I mean, he gave the whole list. But the issue with that about whether or not the altcoins will continue to exist in the long term, or at least in the way that I think a lot of the altcoin space thinks about them, if they're not like an actual equity or some sort of something tied to something in the real world. When we're talking about competing as a money, we're talking about competing communication protocols, and communication protocols always tend toward one. And monetary networks actually are doubly and triply tend to converge on a single unit. And we see this a lot with social media, with languages, and all of these other communication networks. And it's because they are the foundation of establishing an economy. So we generally think about it as like, what's a good example? Let's say like cars on a road. Like, we don't have to all drive the same kind of car, right? We don't have to have the same brand car. You can drive a little small car, and Hotep can drive a big monster truck, whatever it is, doesn't matter. But we all have to have the exact same rules of the road to get along. That's the communication protocol. And a lot of people see these altcoins as like all these fancy apps and everybody's going to have their own, but it's what the money is. It's the rules of the road that establish an economy and allow it to actually take place, allow a market to exist. And that necessitates that we are speaking the same language. And the one that I think will have the broadest acceptance and the most global influence, the one that will solve multi-trillion-dollar problems, is the one that's most independent, most decentralized, and easiest to trust. And I think there are a lot of elements of altcoins that make them really hard to trust. And as we converge more and more towards Bitcoin already, I think that lead will just continue to grow as we figure out more and more ways to build on top of it, and the value propositions of these altcoins start to fall away.
Powerful.
So you said there, Guy, that I think that's a good starting point, is that you said that you believe, I also believe that over time, if we're talking about a communication protocol in the market, really any protocol in the market, that eventually one is going to become the dominant one to such a degree that the others are relatively insignificant. It's not to say that they will completely go away, but that they will become relatively insignificant. I think we've seen this over and over and over again. But we've also seen that leadership shifts. So for instance, if we're talking about mobile phone technology, I mean, go back to 2006, 2007, BlackBerry was more dominant then in that particular sector. Granted, it was a smaller sector, but BlackBerry was so dominant, and Android and iPhone weren't even on the horizon. And then iPhone became more dominant, and now Android is truly dominant. But the dominance becomes like that. But I think so I think that's good. That's a good starting point. So if we're going to talk about what should we bet on, is basically what the conversation that we're having, right? Like, we're going to bet long term. We're going to look 100 years down the road. I think we both believe something evolving from Bitcoin will probably be around 100 years from now. That's what I'm working toward, right? So something's going to be dominant. What do we bet on? And you said that the three metrics that you, and I think that it's fair enough we got to pick some metrics, right, that we're going to judge by. You said the network that is the most independent, the network that is the most decentralized, and the network that is the most trusted. So I guess my question to you would be, I mean, those are three words. They're good words. But if we're going to have a metric, can you explain what independent means and why, for instance, BTC is more independent than, say, BCH? Can you explain what decentralized means and why BTC, for instance, is more decentralized than BCH? And can you do the same for trust as well?
Sure. I think independence and trust actually are kind of wrapped up into one, as far as why I think Bitcoin is better in both categories. Hard forks, I think, are the top most critical attack vector in all of these systems. And I think we've seen that with BCH is that like when you change, like the consensus rules are the property rights. And to be able to easily politically change what those rules are is to essentially be able to change anything about it. Like these are digital networks in the end. And like SegWit2x is actually a great example, is that, you know, it was this huge argument, and there were so many different like disparate groups on either side with, you know, 80% of the hash power being like, oh, we're going to go with this. And so many of these big companies saying we're going to go with SegWit2x, and then user activated soft fork, and all the users were like, no, F off, you know, like it was just huge battle and stink. And they made it seem as if we were just going to hard fork really quick and we were going to change this one metric. I mean, I can't tell you how many times the conversation was just, it's just one number. We're just going to change this one little thing. And, but it is one little thing in the fundamental consensus rules that make the network operate. And the thing ground to a halt. They did a hard fork and there was an off by one bug, and the thing never produced a block. If we had actually gone through with it, it wasn't a question about whether or not we were going to go to 2 megabytes or stay at 1 megabytes. It was a question of whether or not we were going to fundamentally break the security proposition of the network. You know, you don't tweak the ECDSA curve every 6 months just because, you know, maybe we can make it a little bit faster or something like that. It took 7 years for us to even say the ECDSA was secure. Like that's the Lindy effect. I think any hard fork, whatever is completely resetting it. It's to say that, you know, screw the Lindy effect. It doesn't matter like what the rules were. We're just going to fundamentally change how we achieve consensus in this network, and we're just going to start it over. And I think that's one of the absolutely critical elements as to why you can trust the thing. It's because Bitcoin hasn't fundamentally changed its rules. The old addresses are still viable. Everything is backwards compatible. We do update, you know, like updates happen and we do alter how we like tweak how we use it, but only the updated users have to care about it, and only the updated users risk it. And everybody who's been holding those coins for 9 years or whatever is safe as the first day they had.
I think he made a good point on the trust. I'd like to hear him address the decentralized part of things before you go.
Hit those.
Before he does though, just 1 second. And I mean this is kind of up to you, Hotep, since it's your channel. But like we're speaking at that church level, right? So it's like I know what ECDSA is. I know what SegWit2x is. I know every single thing that he's
that's a lot
about,
to explain. So
right, but I also know 99.99% of people who hold Bitcoin have no idea what the hell he just said. Now, I would very much like for people to be able to follow along with this, and I think that we can talk at a pretty high level about this, right? Okay. So like, I think, you know, when you brought up like, oh, the fact that it's backwards compatible, all of that. I mean, we can talk about whether or not, I don't know, could Satoshi come back and spend his coins on BCH? He could, indeed. He could spend the same coins. It's completely backwards compatible. Could he spend it on BSV? He could. Could he spend it on Bitcoin Gold? He could. But I think if we could, I'll try to do it as best I can. I think that like, what would be the most entertaining is if we could talk about this on a level that, let's say, somebody who isn't in the inside baseball, who isn't attending church every Sunday, who doesn't know all the ins and outs, could maybe walk away from this saying, oh, I have a better understanding of what the hell is going on. So it's like, could we talk about like what makes BTC independent in a way where we don't bring up inside baseball things about it, and maybe we talk a little bit about the nature of Bitcoin itself? Can we talk about then decentralization in that way? And can we talk about trust in that way?
All right, let's get into some super chats. Okay. We're going to let Guy hop in after. Josh Randall, thank you. He said, I respect your work, Hotep. Jesus, damn the fakes and the grifters. JR. Kent the Row, what up, homie? Josh Randall again said, I invested in Bitcoin in 2010 and I'm still not totally confident in it. Thank you for your comments. Guy Swann, how would you like to rebuttal to that?
The comment about I'm not totally confident in it?
No, Vin.
Oh, Vin. Okay. Yeah. So I guess I guess inherently a lot of the stuff and the history that goes on in Bitcoin is complicated. I mean, the history of SegWit2x is freaking massive and kind of a shit show. But probably the analogy to just a decent analogy is just that, like, the fundamental rules, the property rights within Bitcoin have not changed. The mechanism that secures it and the mechanism that makes sure those rules are the same as they have been from day one has not been fundamentally changed.
Vin, do you take that as a plausible argument?
No, well, so it's like, I want to know if he's saying that somebody who's been holding coins couldn't spend them, what he's saying is actually false. Because
what he's saying is they haven't changed much, which says, hey, like, we're the way we started is the way we're gonna finish out. You know what to expect from us, and that's what builds trust. The fact that they haven't changed much is he's saying builds trust. Do you agree with that premise, or do you think it's something other?
I think that if that's what he's saying, I understand what he's saying about that. I'll let him finish, and then I can rebut that. I don't think that that's where the nature of trust in Bitcoin comes from. And I think that back to the white paper, Satoshi says where the trust in Bitcoin comes from. So I'm happy to address that, but like I do hear what he's saying. I think that that's probably a good place to start.
Hey, Guy, did I get that correct? Did I explain that correctly?
Yeah, pretty much.
Your side?
Yeah, I think that's one of like
so I think it comes down to
critical network effects in Bitcoin. I think that's a massive one.
I think it comes down to where we place our values for trust. Right? It seems like there's some difference there where, you know, you say not changing much equals trust, and Vin's like, nah, that don't mean trust, right? So Vin, tell me, what is trust to you? How do you establish trust for the Bitcoin?
So Bitcoin, the very first bit of trust is about the cryptography involved in Bitcoin. And so the very first piece of trust is that as of right now, if the cryptography that is being used, so just so that people understand, because a lot of times people's experience with Bitcoin is I scan a QR code on my wallet, I type something in, then all of a sudden it's in your wallet, or it's on an exchange, or it's doing something like that. And so one of the fundamental things that people have to sort of understand, I'm going to do this really high level right now. What's basically happening is you are assigning of an amount of value to what you might consider like a locked box. And so your address is fundamentally, it's like a lock box, and you have a key to that box, and only your key will open it. And it's a cryptographic key. It's using math. This is very strong cryptography. This is like munitions grade cryptography. And this originally was a weapon, right? So it was weaponized to be used by the military. So the first bit of trust is, I trust that you can't get into my lockbox. And now that's true across all of Bitcoin and all of the altcoins. They're all based on that. You don't have, until quantum computing comes out, you're not going to have somebody say that they have broken this person's private key or that person's private key. To understand just how difficult it would be to guess it, and you would need to iterate through it. You can't guess it. There's a level of randomness that you have to iterate through many, many times to find a specific private key. For instance, Hotep Jesus, you've put $10 million on the BTC blockchain. I want to find that $10 million. To find that would be the equivalent of me finding a specific molecule out of all of the molecules inside the Earth, in the atmosphere, molecules. Yeah. That I would find a specific molecule. That's how difficult it is. Yeah. With the computing power that we have now, the sun would burn out before I would be able to find Hotep Jesus's singular private key. Now that, you see, I just said that. Yeah. That is trust. That's now trust. You're like, oh, that's the math behind this? Oh, okay, I can trust that math. So that's the first trust. So the second trust is that same cryptographic technology or a variant of it, that same amount of randomness is what's built in that creates proof of work. And so what we can also know, proof of work is basically a giant game, you could say, that it's almost like dice rolls. That you're rolling dice and you only get a block and you get the block reward, but it's like a trillion, quadrillion sided dice. And there's only only the numbers 1 through 100 have to come up. And so what the miners are doing is this is again at a high level, right? So like autists don't come in and say, I know what mining is, I know how to mine, but I'm talking to people who, this is at a high level for the trust. It's the miners, what mining is doing is billions of dice rolls a second. And they're all trying to get that one of these numbers. And then when they get it, they say out to everybody, I got it. Now, here's the interesting thing. Where the trust comes from is that I can know beyond a shadow of a doubt, because I can verify, it's got a number of leading zeros. I know you can't guess that number. Nobody could have guessed it. The only way you could get it is by doing those dice rolls. So I see it. And now we have a community of these people doing that who are all agreeing with each other. Okay, yeah, you got it. Okay, you got it. Okay, you got it. Okay, you got it. You got it. You got it. And that is what is securing the network. And so as the amount of hash rate goes up, this is perhaps the greatest argument, I think, for BTC, is that, and this is the Steelman argument. The Steelman argument is BTC has the highest hash rate by far. What that means is that there are more people and there is more capital being invested to expend energy and to build machines specifically that do nothing else except dice rolls. And that's a long-term investment, right? So there's manufacturers of the machines, then I've got to outlay capital, and the margins are small on this, very small, and it's very competitive. So the biggest actual argument for trust is, and the network effect of trust is, look at all the people who already trust it. Not only do they trust it just to hold their coins, but here's all these billions of dollars in capital that is trusting to design the machines, build the data centers, stick them in there, spend the electricity, and they're doing all of that because they trust that what they get will have more value tomorrow than it has today, or at least the same amount. Right? So in Bitcoin, that's where I believe trust comes from. Now, what you'll notice I didn't say in there at all is that the code of the nodes that are running it has changed or hasn't changed. I don't believe that's where trust comes from in Bitcoin at all. I don't think that's where Satoshi said trust came from, and I don't think that's where most people who are close to the metal think that the trust in Bitcoin comes from.
So you said a couple of things there. One is actually, funny story. Your note on trust about the molecules thing. That math is actually a little bit bigger than that analogy. It's
there you go.
The whole key space is 10 to the 70, which is actually closer to the number of atoms in the observable universe. Like it's an absolutely staggering number. But on the idea of the fact that like that private key protects your ownership, or the fact that you are the only one that can control those coins, or you can only move, the only one who can move them. And then the fact that the trust in someone doing the hash for the next block is also a huge degree of trust. The only reason those two things are required, the only reason that you need a private key to move the coins, the only reason that you need a hash to make the next block is because the consensus rules are being validated. And you use that key word there was that you can validate the hash on the block. If the full nodes aren't validating, well, then you don't need it. Again, it's just software. There's no reason. It's not like they're just voluntarily choosing to not like scribble out my private key or scribble out my public key on the coins and write in their own. It's the fact that every node on the network would check their work and say, no, that's not right. This block 10 blocks ago when this transaction was created has Guy's public key, not yours. And they reject the block, and therefore the miner doesn't get paid. It's because the entire network of nodes is validating the rules, that the rules say you need this key in particular to release these coins. Like a good example, actually. So
I unless I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, what you're saying is actually technically not true. So are you saying that every node on the network, so for instance, if I spin up a non-mining node right now, which I run several nodes myself,
a full node,
or a node, a full node, right? If I spin that up, I can only follow the miners. If I'm not mining, no changes, none of my changes, none of my validating transactions affects whether or not one of them makes it. As a matter of fact, I could reject every transaction and it will have zero effect on what is mined. So are you referring to, it sounded like you were saying that the rules on all of the nodes on the network could actually stop a miner from mining a transaction. Are you saying that?
It cannot stop them from mining the transaction, but it will evict them from the network for breaking the rules.
It will. Will evict a miner from the network?
Yes. Yeah. It will. They won't connect to the node anymore.
Can you tell us the process by which a non-mining node can evict a mining node from the network?
Yeah. If I send, like, let's say we're all nodes on the network. Like this is the fundamental way that the decentralization of the network is actually secured. Let's say you run a node, Hotep runs a node, I run a node.
Are these mining nodes? Are we mining?
No, we're just full nodes right now.
We're just full.
Let's say we're mining just for the sake of not having new players in this. We're all mining nodes and we're all running full nodes. Hotep produces a block that tries to delete my public key from my coins and put his on it. You are running a full node. I am running a full node, and we check that block against the rules, against the only reason we can define what a Bitcoin is as a digital point is because it has an explicit set of rules, and we check, does it follow those rules? And if he breaks those rules, well, then we evict him from the network. He can mine all the hell he wants on his new altcoin where he can just change the keys. But you and I are now on our own network. And whether we're mining or not, it doesn't really matter. We just hope somebody's mining because we need to keep going. But it doesn't matter. Hotep is no longer part of the network because he broke the rules. It's a game where everybody on the network is a referee at the exact same time.
But everybody, mining nodes
extend the chain.
Okay.
Yes.
But no other node. So every other node that is just a listening node, that is a non-mining node, if they're not mining, the only thing that they can do is follow the longest chain that has the same consensus rules that they have. So you've described two different things. One of the things that you described is a node falling out of consensus. So a node that has changed the rules for some reason, they're running a different rule set.
They forked off to BCH. They added the block size.
We know that. But that doesn't sound like that's what you were describing in the beginning. In the beginning, that's just a known property, right? If you're not in consensus, you're off on your own. And by the way, in BCH, which has 7 or 8 different node sort of implementations, this sort of thing has happened actually before, where there's been a bug and this guy just went off on his own. Or you had the 6-month hard fork, this guy didn't upgrade and he goes off on his own and the difficulty kills him and he's just like, oh shit, I need to upgrade. And he upgrades and then he follows again. But what it sounded like you said, and what you just said again, is that you said that every node on the network. So again, I need you to define, when you say every node, are you excluding, for instance, because if you're a maximalist, BTC maximalist, you must run a node. So are you saying that your node, even combined with, let's say, 1 million other maximalist nodes, could somehow prevent a miner who was mining with Bitcoin Core, could somehow evict him from the network somehow?
Yes. Those million users are the network. What is the network? It's the computers. It's everybody running the software. And everybody else connects to those nodes. And if none of us let that block in, then that miner's not part of it anymore.
If none of you let that block in, you will fall out of consensus.
With that miner falls out of consensus with the network, with everybody running the software.
If the rest of the miners let that block in, it doesn't matter what you guys do, they will remain in consensus and build on top of that block. There is no mechanism.
If they build on top of that block, nobody running a node even sees it. They just made an altcoin. It's like a miner. A miner is like a gold miner. Like they don't get to mine gravel out of the mine and say, oh, the gravel is going to be gold's price on the market. They have to mine explicitly the atomic structure of gold to go to the market and sell it at the price of gold. They can't do it with gravel. They can't do it with carbon, anything else. They have to mine gold. The miners on the Bitcoin network are the same way. They can't send a transaction to anybody that is running a node. The exchanges run a node. You can't send an invalid transaction to those people because the node will just say there's no transaction. It's not valid. I've not seen one.
This is astonishing because it's really weird to have a conversation with do you do Bitcoin development? I didn't ask about that. Do you? Have you ever
development? No, I don't do development.
Have you ever written an application ever?
No, I write scripts, little things.
Right, like a wallet. Have you ever written a wallet?
No.
Okay.
Lightning script. That's about it.
Or anything like that.
Do what?
Or like an indexer where you index blockchain data so that you could serve it later.
Dude, I know what I'm talking about, and all you're doing right now is just you're not answering, you're not actually talking about the point.
All right, let me hop in here, fellas.
Hold on, Hotep. It's crazy because unless I am misunderstanding what you are saying right now. Okay. Unless I am misunderstanding it, which is possible, you don't understand how Bitcoin works.
I think Guy is saying is you can reject somebody from the chain. You're saying if you don't meet the consensus, you're just on your own. Is that what the argument is happening here?
No, yes. I think the difference in the argument is this.
Well, Guy said yes. Guy said that's his argument. Did I get that correct?
I think both of those are basically true.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to, I guess what I'm trying to understand here is, so the creation of the blockchain is done by miners and only miners.
Yes.
So if I want to know this, so if I just decide that I'm going to reject a block that every other miner is building on top of, my chain just stopped because there's no new blocks being produced.
Sure.
So my node is now, basically it's dead. My node is dead because I've made that, because I'm not making new blocks if I'm just a full node.
You're just waiting for another block. You're just waiting for a block at that point.
Yes, but if I just reject that and there's no miner who's mining, because all the miners are mining on top of the block that I rejected.
Yes.
Their TIF has extended.
Sure.
So if I say, and which is, you can actually do it. It's called Invalidate Block. It's a command that you can do right on your node in the command line.
You don't have to do it. You don't have to do it manually. You have to bring up the console. Your node does it if they break the rules. I guess you mean, are you saying that even if it follows the rule, you can invalidate the block? I'm sorry. What do you mean by that?
Yes, you can.
Okay. I'm asking if that's the specific example you brought up, because what I'm talking about is just that your node will do it automatically. Like you don't have to manually check the block on a calculator or something like that.
I think maybe my misunderstanding or it's, so are we talking about a situation where non-mining nodes just decide that they're going to install a new version of software? The miners are mining the same software? Or are you talking about that some miner decides, I want to run a different piece of software? In which case we have no argument. We know how this works. It's a hard fork. Yeah. And then if your node is running the one that's the same rules as these miners, you get blocks. And if you're running the rules that is the miner who went away, you get these blocks. But interestingly enough, you're not evicted from the network. That's the first thing that's interesting about Bitcoin. You're still on the network. You're still on the network. We actually are seeing that right now with BCH just had a hard fork where they split. Bitcoin ABC went and they formed a new coin with new rules. BCH and BCHA.
How is that going, by the way? Has there been consolidation on that?
I mean, there's a hash war going on, which is cool to watch. Like, it was cool to watch with BSV. It's cool to watch it now. But because the reason, so when if you do an old transaction, if you do a transaction that's valid on both chains right now, it will do what's called replay. So if I do a BCH transaction of old coins, it'll spend it on BCHA. The reason why is because they're still networked to each other. They're still sending. It's many to many. There's no eviction from the network. They're still talking to each other.
If they send an invalid transaction, they will be evicted.
No. If they send an invalid transaction, the transaction is
the only way. The only way the replay works is because it's valid. It's valid on both chains.
Yes. This is that, and that's what I said. But they're not. It's not eviction from the network. The network is still there. They're still communicating. So you can have a valid block. So for instance, if there was no replay protection on BCH, that was put in when the BCH fork happened. If there was no replay protection on BCH, people would have been spending their Bitcoin, and then they would have been spending their BCH as well. Mm-hmm. Right? This is kind of a bad situation for trusts, which is the reason why replay protection was put in. But it's a unique thing that I think a lot of people don't understand about the Bitcoin network, is that just changing the rules doesn't evict you from the network. You could have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 chains with different rules, and all of the nodes would be sending. Now, I'd reject 10% of everything that came to my node because it wouldn't be valid. It would have different opcodes. It would have a different block size limit. It would have whatever. But the network itself is all combined, which gets us kind of to this point, right? This point of convergence. And the convergence that you talked about everything converging to one network. The interesting thing with Bitcoin is we can have everything converge to one network while having multiple chains. So we can have BTC and BTC, not anymore, but in theory, we can have BTC and someone can split from BTC tomorrow with new consensus rules. Let's say they increase the block size, but they don't add replay protection. And those BTC nodes and those nodes will communicate with each other forever. And when I sync up a brand new node, it can actually pull blocks from either one of them to sync them up. So so I agree. And this is why thinking of it as money is wrong, because that's not how the structure lays out. It's a value transfer network, but we need to think further. A single Bitcoin network can have multiple chains on it. So even if we converge to one Bitcoin network, that isn't to say that we're only going to have one chain.
Let me hop in here.
Okay.
Guy, hold your thought. What's up, people? Hotep Jesus. We are in the middle of a little intermission right now. We got 213 in the room. Make sure y'all hit the like button. Make sure y'all hit the subscribe button. Y'all got two experts, two titans going at it right now, mentally sparring. I want y'all to hold y'all questions. Put y'all questions in the super chat. We'll answer questions at the end. You'll get Bitcoin crypto questions for our real live experts. I mean, that's worth thousands of dollars right there. So go ahead and drop your questions in the super chats and we'll get these experts. I'd like to just take this time for everybody to just introduce themselves. Vin, the projects you're working on. Guy, projects you're working on and your work here. Vin, we'll start with you. Then Guy, we'll go with you and then you can go right into your rebuttal.
In the Bitcoin side, I think most people know me for being a founder of Cointext, which is a SMS wallet, primarily running on Bitcoin Cash, but we supported BTC, Dash, Litecoin, Ravencoin, Decred, some other ones as well. We just recently, we were in as many as 40 countries. We just recently took the service down when there was this split with BCH and BCHA. Seemed like an appropriate time to do it. But since that time, in the last 3 years, I've contributed quite a few libraries and protocols, particularly some that are associated with both being able to do some things with the new Bitcoin Cash, like betting, like sports betting. That's one of the new things that we've got coming out on chain. and with oracles, and as well with the token protocol, which is SLP, which is on Bitcoin Cash. So that's and I'm full time with Bitcoin, so I spend my day on development all day.
Nice. Guy, tell us about what you who you are, what you're working on.
I am same full-time Bitcoin, and been dedicated to it for about a year, almost a year now, but pretty much at the beginning of 2020. Started a production company after the podcast started to really take off. I host Bitcoin Audible, and now Shitcoin Insider, and slowly getting a which is just kind of my guilty pleasure on digging into all the scams and stuff in the space, and slowly branching it out into a network, and starting some education and YouTube videos and stuff. Just had a great talk with Michael Saylor as I start getting the conversations, the interviews or whatever more. And the main format of the show, however, where this all started, was I read all the historical pieces, all the news, all the pieces about the cryptography, about the financial networks, about smart contracts, and Nick Szabo's old pieces, like literally anything and everything about Bitcoin. I read it aloud and then commentate, explain, try to explain further and break into all the principles of the game theory, everything. I've got almost 600 episodes now on pretty much damn near anything that you could think about Bitcoin. And in fact, actually, there's a great episode about this, the principle, or the thing we were just talking about. It's by Stop and Decrypt, I think, actually, and it's called An Impenetrable Fortress of Validation. And it's talking about how the nodes choose, or how the nodes confirm that the rules have been followed. And like he was talking about, he's absolutely right that the networks will still talk to each other. Like they're still on the same ports. They'll still see each other as nodes on the network. And like you said, they will replay transactions, but they will not send each other blocks. They will not send each other data in the blockchain. That is what makes one Bitcoin Cash and the other one Bitcoin. And the fundamental thing about it is that those nodes, those rules aren't just ownership rules. They are the 21 million. They are the monetary policy. They are anything and everything that defines a Bitcoin from a Bitcoin Cash, from the Federal Reserve database, from Zcash, whatever the hell it is. It is only because those nodes are checking the whole list of rules and making sure that the block, all the transactions, everything in them, and that they completely, they tie into the entire chain all the way back to the beginning. It's the only way we know the rules are being followed. It's the only way that we know that this thing isn't corruptible. And the only reason, if we lose the ability to do that full audit, if we lose the ability for nodes to validate every single piece of data that gets added to that chain in real time, we lose all of those rules. We lose the ownership. We eventually lose the 21 million. We lose everything that makes this important. And I think the trust and the value of this is the fact that you can confirm everything start to finish. And that is because you can run a full node, you can do the math, and you can check it yourself. And if anybody sends bullshit information, anybody breaks those rules, you don't see it. It's not on yours. You don't see the transaction. You don't see the block. And you wait until valid rules extend the chain.
Guy, the producer, real quick, Vin. The producers of the show have asked Guy for you to stop clicking your pen. I just got that message.
Crap. I'm sorry.
No, it's
my fidgety thing. My bad.
my question to you, Guy, is how is what you described true on BTC, but for instance, not true on BCH? And by what you described, if to paraphrase it, and you can tell me if I'm paraphrasing it incorrectly, the ability for nodes to ensure that all of the data that comes in matches the rules that are in their software. How is that true on BTC, but not true on BCH?
Well, in a short-term sense, In a short-term sense, it's pretty much true on both chains for the time being. But in a broader sense, if we're talking about probably the good aspects to hit are the block size, is that if you pack as much data as possible into the block itself, like let's say you get 10 megabyte, 20 megabyte, 50 megabyte blocks, as soon as you get to a point where you can overload, like for instance, like if I wanted to audit the YouTube servers right now, can't do that shit. They add like a terabyte a minute or something stupid like that. They could be doing whatever the hell they wanted on there. My computer can't do jack. I have absolutely no assurances. They could open it up to me. I could check whatever I want. I can't confirm anything. I'm just being overloaded with data. And the rules of Bitcoin, the rules of the blockchain require that you get back to the creation of every Bitcoin. You don't know if that's inflation Bitcoin. You don't know if that's followed the 21 million unless you go all the way back to when that was actually mined in a block, which means you have to check the entire data set. So that's number one, is the fact that the data set is kept constrained so that the ability to validate is never lost over the long term. The second one is that hard forks change the rules, which means that you can, if somebody can just hard fork the rules, like then you have to hope that the new rules are actually able to confirm the 21 million. Like BSV is actually a decent example of this, is that they ripped out the multi-sig when they forked away from you guys. They ripped out the multi-sig, or you guys, but BCH. They ripped out the multi-sig and hacked together their own version and hard forked, in to have their own version of multi-sig. And people have been using it for I don't know, a year, I guess, maybe. And the way you probably know this about Bitcoin script, how it's inverted, like it's a stack language. Because of that, they used the wrong operator. I can't remember if it's less than or greater than, but they were trying to say that as long as you have more than 2 keys, you can unlock these coins. And instead they wrote it as, if you have less than 2 keys, you can unlock these coins. And somebody realized it. It was like months and months went by and nobody realized that this hard forked rule into the protocol was actually locking nobody's coins. So no, you don't have to go out and find an atom in the universe here to unlock the coins. You can just put a 0 in the signature and you could just wipe out everybody's coins. And somebody just started exploiting. Somebody figured it out at some point. And it's only because they hard forked and altered the fundamental rules for how somebody owns a Bitcoin, that they were actually able to put that bug in the system by accident. They didn't do it on purpose, but that was the attack vector. That was how they got open to that problem.
Vin, you're shaking your head. Why are you shaking your head?
Okay, so he's conflated several things here. So I'll do this. I'll do the second part first, and then I'll talk about the constraining of the blocks, because it's okay. So I'll just do the second part first.
Okay.
What Bitcoin SV did was they didn't take out multi-sig. What they did was they sunsetted a type of transaction called pay to script hash.
Yes. Sorry, it was the one that was the common multi-sig standard.
Let me explain why. I'll explain it at a high level so people can sort of understand why it makes a difference and why what you just said is incorrect. So the locking mechanism for Bitcoin is, as he says, it's a stack language. Basically, what it means is that I feed in kind of a stack of things, and then there's a stack of instructions. So you could imagine that it's something like, at a very simple, it's something like, I need to end up at the number 1, let's say. And so I feed in like the number 10. And then the first thing is divide by 2. And so then it turns into 5. Then it says add 3. Okay. And then it turns into 8. Right. And then it's like divide by 8. And that's the last one. And that gives me 1. So that means that it's only going to work if I put in a specific number. Right. Now, what the pay to script hash is something put together by Gavin Andreessen back in the day. It's used in Bitcoin Cash. It's used in BTC. Basically, what it allows you to do is it allows you to create a very, very long script, very long one, right, with lots of instructions in it to create a very complex lock. But that all that you need to put as the address is you could put it in this standardized format. You basically take the big script and you hash it first. It turns it into this little tiny bit of data, and then you unroll it when you're doing the process, right? Mm-hmm. So Bitcoin SV, they took that out, but what they allowed was that what you do is you just put the script in. Now, the thing about just putting the script in is it's longer in the output, obviously, like it's longer, and it's also a lot less private. So I can look and see exactly the type of.
You can read the operators. You can just read
I can basically read the code that unlocks this. With the pay to script hash, I don't know. Is that a multi-sig with 7 signatures? I don't know. Is that some complex thing where you're changing data around and it's got to have 17 signatures? And you can do all of those things. It's a pretty robust language, even on BTC. It's even more robust on BCH. You can do all kinds of crazy things because they added new opcodes. So basically what happened that he's describing is somebody wrote the lock wrong. This is not something that is because of the hard fork or anything. Somebody in their wallet code, a developer, wrote the lock wrong. And since I can see all of the code on the chain, I can see, oh, look, this is not, oh, he confused the two. I can spend this, right? If I can see all the components of the lock, and I know that your lock is faulty, I pick your lock. Now, if it was pay to script hash on BTC, I wouldn't be able to do that because I wouldn't know what the lock is. I wouldn't know, right? But BSV, they changed that. So it's not that hard fork made anything less secure. It's not that hard fork made anything less validatable. What that hard fork did was it exposed any bugs that the developers do, which, by the way, is exactly why there's all these DeFi hacks on Ethereum all the time, because the smart contract code is exposed. Okay? So what you've got a group of hackers that are out there, they know there's going to be bugs in these things. And all they do is go and look, and they're like, oh, I can take $50 million. He screwed that up right there. Boom, and they take it. So that's what he's describing. Now, there's some very good reasons to not use, there are some arguments. I don't think they're good reasons, but there are arguments to not to use pay to script hash and to just put the script on the chain. And this was a decision that it could have been made by Satoshi. Could have made that decision that way. And the type of locking script that we use right now is not the original one that Satoshi used, as a matter of fact. We use pay to public key hash. In the white paper, it's pay to public key, but it's not as secure.
Yeah.
It's not as secure.
You could still do pay to public key, but obviously it's not very.
You can, it's not secure.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about here is we're talking about preferences, but that had nothing to do with the hard fork.
Well, I'll disagree. Well, first, I'll give you a better example if we can. We'll put that one aside. I think it did have a lot to do with the hard fork, simply because there's 2 problems with the hard fork in that situation. One is that they forced themselves to rewrite code that already worked, code that's critical to people owning coins. Second is that the hard fork sorry, I got to stop you. They sunset pay to script hash. Yeah. If you have coins that are in pay to script hash addresses right now, you can spend them on Bitcoin SV. Old multi-sig, okay? If you have old multi-sig, you can spend them. Yes. That's not what I was getting at. What I was saying was that they now have to, because pay to script hash was using a code base that allowed you to just run the multi-sig that had been used for years and had been trusted. Because they took that out, they now had to rewrite their own. And that is what exposed the fault. But in a different in a different problem with the hard fork in general, is that it showed, like, hard forks themselves just show that the network is centralized and it's very easy to change the rules. And it doesn't necessarily matter what rules are changed, because, like, I mean, this is a core to why I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. Like, if the SegWit 2x had actually gone, jargon, if the rules of Bitcoin had actually changed when all the major businesses and miners had basically tried to force a change on the network, I would have been very worried about Bitcoin's future. I would have been I would have assumed that it was going to turn into a giant political fight over what the fundamental property rights of this network are, what the monetary policy is. This is about securing sound money in the face of governments, in the face of central banks, the largest adversaries in the world. You don't just willy-nilly let's just throw all the rules around and do whatever the hell we want. Let's put a whole bunch of gadgets and wing digits in this thing. Like that is the exact opposite of what you want. You want a bedrock that is absolutely solid and can survive against even the largest attacker, because you didn't alter those rules arbitrarily, because you didn't you didn't make it so everybody has to download a new client like on a Thursday and do this every 6 months or something, because now everybody's on the same running code. Everybody's on the same version. Everybody's on the same code base. Like that is a problem of centralization just right there. One of the biggest issues I think that Bitcoin has is that everybody runs Bitcoin Core. Yeah, we run a whole bunch of different versions of Bitcoin Core, but that's a centralization problem. I wish there were more clients in more languages, because that means that there's a smaller attack surface. There's less likely that one major thing can go wrong and take the whole thing down. I think all of those are massive decentralization problems. But I think when you add it all up, the fact that like something like Bcash or Monero, and I really liked the privacy coins. I thought they were a really decent like addition as like a Bitcoin sidechain or something like that. But the fact that Monero hard forks all the time, like that's where all the rules go out the window. And you're starting the whole, is this sound money? What's the monetary policy? Do I actually own my coins again? Is it really my private key that's needed to unlock these things? That's when all that goes out the window, and we have to wait to make sure that people don't get obliterated, that transactions still keep coming, blocks still keep coming. It's the Lindy effect again. And I think that's absolutely critical to why this thing's worth so much.
There's three things I'd like us to tackle before we end tonight. One of them is going to be constraining of the blocks. I know Vin wanted to tackle that. Ownership of these coins, and also decentralization.
I want to hear this one.
Okay, so so I can quickly go through those three.
Well, I'm not. Well, I think I want you to go constraining the blocks. I want Guy to defend the decentralized point you made earlier, and then I want you to rebuttal him earlier talking about ownership.
Okay. So the constraining of let me make sure that I have your argument correct, Guy, so that I don't straw man you here.
Got you.
Your argument is that because it is imperative that more rather than fewer nodes and individuals are able to validate the chain and therefore participate in the network, the more constrained the block size is, the greater the number of individuals who will be able to participate in the network. And if the block size is unconstrained, then the limits of the hardware and software, or the hardware, because they're all running the same software, but the limits of the hardware that individuals who are running nodes becomes strained, and perhaps to the point where those individuals are no longer able to run nodes. Is that your argument?
Roughly, yes. Yes.
Okay. So I guess my question at that point is, what is the correct constraint? Because if you say that a 1 megabyte block size is the correct constraint, I tell you that 1 megabyte block size makes me unable to run a node on my Pentium 1 computer from 1996.
Sure.
Okay. And it's probably on my laptop from 2002. That one maybe it can do it. It's not going to do it that great. What I've heard is Luke Dash Jr., who is a well-known developer, gave a presentation that at first I thought was parody, but I guess he was being completely serious, where he said actually the block size should be taken down to 300K. And the reason why it should be taken down there is to ensure that people can always run nodes on their phone. So what we run into here is it's just basically now we're in a subjective, there's no way to say this is the right constraint or this is the right constraint, because the constraint is determined by the power of the individual hardware that the node owner has. And so while I will agree that yes, there is no doubt that at a certain level of block size, if it's consistent blocks, some users who are running at the edge of their machine's capabilities, let's say a Raspberry Pi, that they are now able, at least with this version, maybe the next version, it'll be different. They're now able to easily run 1 megabyte blocks. Perhaps if it was always 8 megs, they wouldn't be able to do that. It would be too expensive for them, and they would not be able to run nodes. And to that, I say, okay, but am I willing to sacrifice the trade-off of more transactions, lower fees, which incentivize other things, so that this individual who at the end of the day is just holding his coins and just wants to run a node and is not even making any transactions because he's just holding, am I going to sacrifice businesses being able to use the chain for many, many applications and to make a profit to ensure that individuals like that are able to keep running their node off their DSL connection at home? And my answer personally is no. That's my answer, no.
DSL, so I got dial-up, baby. I got that sweet dial-up.
DSL. Oh my god.
God, I hated DSL. So yeah, there's no. It's all just subjective. Like, what is the right thing? And that's why I think it's that's why it landed on. That's why it landed. I'm sorry. What?
So then, why was 1 meg when Bitcoin Cash changed it to 8? Right? Why was 1 meg the right number at that time, and 8 was wrong, such that it was an attack on Bitcoin and became known as Bcash?
Because it's not about the fact that 1 megabyte is right or better. It's about the fact that there is no right solution. The block size is meaningless in the actual scaling problem. It's a drop in the ocean, and that 1 megabyte is consensus. 1 megabyte is not breaking the rules. 1 megabyte doesn't risk owning who owns what. 1 megabyte doesn't risk 21 million. 1 megabyte is the consensus right now.
8 megabyte did risk that? How?
Yes.
How?
Because you have to hard fork. You have to alter the rules of the network.
How many coins have been lost, and how many coins have been lost on Bitcoin Cash?
No idea. It's if you consider the SegWit coins. So there's an interesting thing here. So this is like what happened with the oh crap, my fidget. I can't do that. This is what happened with the kind of 51% attack that happened like a year ago, was that they did a hard fork to unlock. So there's a different, he was talking about, Vin, you were talking about like you can upgrade the opcodes and you can upgrade the types of signatures and that sort of stuff. Well, one of the big things that was like a huge debate was a signature type called SegWit. And this happened all during the whole block size thing. So it's just a new one of those little tricks. And when BCH actually took SegWit out, what it did is it took away who was owning those coins. Like that's the thing, that's the signature that says, oh, those coins are mine. And because they weren't going to use SegWit on the network, then basically all of these coins basically came up for grabs. And a couple of the major miners were trying to take these coins after they got unlocked. And some miner that was not involved in the hard fork, some unknown miner on the network, tried to mine a transaction with them in it really quick. But it was pretty clear that everybody was set up for this to happen. And like 2 of the major mining pools on the network actually apparently seeing this rolled back 2 or 3 blocks, I think, to undo that other miner's transaction and to snatch all the coins. And now they said that, oh, this is so that we can give it back to the rightful owners. But this is a perfect example, is that you create a hard fork and now you have to trust these two miners. I mean, they never proved it. I went back and looked at it a couple months later and I was like,
they did. You realize that they did get it back to the original owners, right? I
don't trust that. How the hell are they going to know everybody who owns those SegWit coins? And that's the thing, is that why do I have to trust two miners to get it back to the right people? Like, they already locked their coins on the thing. Like, those miners don't own the network. Like, they don't decide who owns what. Like, I shouldn't have to trust that, oh, well, they got it back to the right people. Maybe they did. Maybe they're nice. But what if the other guy had gotten it? What if all those coins had just been lost? It's only because of the hard fork that fundamental rule change was possible into who owns what.
Did they lose those coins on BTC? I think the interesting part here is you cannot. Right, they didn't lose them on BTC, right?
Sure.
So somebody changed.
BTC didn't hard fork.
Right. Somebody changed the rules, and then I can decide what software I want to run on my miner. There's no way. I can change any rule that I want tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's open source code.
Yeah.
I can change any rule, and anyone else I make the software public, and anyone else can run the software. And if they run the software, we've got a new network, and you can move value on that network with the new rules. There's no way to prevent. See, the problem, and this is actually
anybody can change the rules. Totally agree with you.
Philosophical issue that we have to deal with Bitcoin, and we see it. The only way to prevent a hard fork is basically shame. You have to create a culture wherein you make it a sin.
Or run a node. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about it.
If you're running a node, you can change the software on your node.
Sure. I was meaning that if somebody else does it and you're running a node, it won't matter to you.
No. Well, what I'm saying is you're always going to follow the rules that are in your software. Yes. Any miner who is running the same rule set, you will follow that chain. And you will be following each other because you're following the same rule set. But you cannot there is no way for you to prevent me from entering into your network with a new rule set. You can't.
No.
There's no way to prevent it.
No. Not until you try to take advantage of those. No, not until you try to exploit them.
No, you can't prevent me from entering the network and communicating with you. What you can do is, when I send you data, if I send you a transaction and it doesn't fit your rules, you reject the transaction. If I send you a block and it's invalid by your rules, you reject the block. But I'm still communicating with you, and guess what? You're still communicating with me.
Well, if you do it too much, you automatically get blacklisted.
No.
So my node, there's a blacklist. You can.
You have to do that specifically. I can blacklist any peer that I want.
No, if you keep sending my node bad blocks, I don't have to do anything. The node will do it automatically. The first time it happens, there's like a time period that your IP address or something. But I think there's like a couple of thresholds or something, and until
you can absolutely decide that you're going to not connect to a peer. Right? You can absolutely decide that. You can absolutely decide. But I'm saying you can decide that manually. You can say, this peer right here, I don't like. And you can even choose what peers you want to start with, the seed peers, right? When you're just first syncing up, you can choose the link.
I did that once.
You have a great deal of control over what happens with your own node. What you don't have any control over is what other people are doing on the network. The best you can do is to say, I won't connect with you. That's the best you can do, right? So you can't prevent anyone from entering the network with a new set of rules. You can't prevent anyone from mining that set of rules within the network. And you can't prevent any node from changing their software and following those rules. And so if we say hard forks are bad, the only way that you can stop someone in your community from changing the rules and doing what I just described is shame. You have to create a culture that says it's a sin. If you do it, it's bad. If you do it, it's an attack. If you do it, it will reduce the value of this chain. If you allow people to do this and you say that it's okay, it'll take the price of all of us down. It's wrong, wrong, wrong. Because besides that, the way that Bitcoin works, you have no option, none.
Well, see, this is where one of those other, like the kind of the fundamental network, the reasons why I think we're going to converge on one money is the Schelling point, the idea of the fact that in confusion, in the absence of like knowing exactly where to go or what to do, everybody falls on one default. This is why Bitcoin didn't change, is because the current consensus rules are the Schelling point. So now anybody can change, like you said, anybody can change the rules, anybody can fork, they can do whatever they want. It's code. I can go in and just, I don't know what I'm doing really, but I can just fuck shit up right now on my node and, write whatever rules I want. But I can't communicate. I can't send transactions based on those. Like, I can't give myself 10,000 Bitcoin, no matter how bad I wish I could, and just send it to somebody or send it to an exchange, because if they're running a node, they're going to check that shit. They're going to be like, this doesn't work.
Well,
and
if they're
going to kick me out.
If they're running your version of the software, you absolutely could, because that's how I can trade BCH on an exchange.
Yes, but they're not going to do that because I just gave myself 10,000 random Bitcoin.
But that's the reason why people don't give them. Because if you gave yourself 10,000 random Bitcoin, no miner would mine your chain.
It's not about miners. It's the fact that, I mean, miners are full nodes too, so they are included in the group, but it's about all the networks. It's about the fact that like if Hotep gave himself 10,000 coins, I'd be like, get the fuck out of here. Like,
yourself 10,000 coins if no one has mined the block.
You just edit it.
No,
I could just go into the blockchain and erase the one Bitcoin and just put a bunch of zeros at the end of it. Like you said, it's a piece of software. It's a ledger on my computer.
No, because that won't be
valid. It won't be valid.
Yeah, and nobody could even, what you're describing, no one could even mine that. So if you alter
because they're checking the rules. Like, that's my point.
If you alter one bit in any block, anywhere in the blockchain as it stands, it invalidates the entire blockchain cryptographically.
If you check the hashes, a lot of miners don't even do it. A lot of miners are just in a pool and they're just taking the hash from the mining pool and then mining on it and hoping that the block is right. But they don't do it. Some of them don't run full nodes.
No, the mining pool is checking it, because if they don't check it, they don't get the coins.
Exactly. So and they don't get the coins because the whole network runs nodes and they can't send it to anybody. But they create.
What I'm telling you is that the only reason someone would hard fork is because they believe that other people will run the rules and really they better have some miners who have already agreed that they agree with the rules. Having gone through hard forks now, I know exactly how it works. We just went through BCHA. Yeah. Nobody is going to just write rules. What you described about the writing rules willy-nilly, you could do that, but it's a waste of time, it's a waste of energy, and a waste of money. The only people write, and that's why none of the hard forks look like that. Because the only time you have a hard fork is when there is a demand from the market, miners who are saying, hey, these rules are not profitable for us, and we don't believe that these rules over here are going to, in the long term, be the best. So let's change the rules, and we'll devote hash and money to that because we believe it's this side. Now, the argument you're making is, like I started out, you're making the Catholic Church argument. If somebody came and they said, what denomination of Christians should I be? You would have 1.2 billion people who would say, you should be a Catholic. And the reason you should be a Catholic is, look, it's the most established church. They've even got Vatican City. It's not going anywhere. Obviously, the rituals are great. Look at the history. It's all good, right? But that may not resonate with you. And clearly it doesn't, because there's people going to all different types of denominations, right? And then you have the Eastern Orthodox. There's only 200 million of them. But you ask them, and they're like, yeah, but we were the same at one point till 1054, and then we split apart. Our Pope excommunicated their Pope excommunicated our Pope. Sounds familiar? They split, and they're like, but our rituals are older. They've added new rules over there at the Catholics. Those are not the original rituals. We kept the original. There's only 200 million of them. But then if you combine all the Protestants together, there's 800 million of them. So there's more of them, but they're in different denominations. And it's like, why does someone decide to be a Lutheran? Why does somebody decide to be an evangelical? Why does somebody decide to be a Presbyterian? Because it resonates with them. But to say, well, the Catholic Church is better. It's better for XYZ is exactly what you're saying when you say, because BTC is just a set of rules. That's it. It's just a specific set of rules that right now, more people think, or more people are gravitating around. But that doesn't mean that in the future it's going to be better. BTC could be BlackBerry.
Here's the thing. Here's why I don't think the religion angle kind of the analogy doesn't quite fit, and it's because it goes back to the communication protocol. Is that we talk about just the convergence on one, like the tendency to need to converge on one, because the very purpose of money is to solve the double coincidence of wants.
Bitcoin isn't money.
I disagree. We'll come back to this. And I really want to get to the. I really want to go back to the block size. But let me finish this up real quick. So, is the reason it converges on one as a means of having the fundamental, the most liquid asset in the economy is the money, because that is the thing everyone can leverage against for value in order to solve the double coincidence of wants. You have a shoe, I have a sandwich. Maybe I don't want a shoe right now. Well, then you trade the shoe for money, then money goes to me for the sandwich. So if we're all using our own money, it would be as if you're speaking Klingon, I'm speaking Dothraki, and Hotep is speaking English. And it's like, okay, yeah, we could all have an app that live translates everything, but that's like a huge pain in the ass, and it's not going to happen. We're going to converge on our conversation for a single language.
We have one. It's called Visa. It works very, very well. It's also called MasterCard. Take your Visa to some.
Really?
Visa doesn't work well?
No.
I can go anywhere in the world with my Visa card, and I can get just about anything that I want.
If
dollar. That's not working well, I don't know what is.
It's the dollar. The dollar is the global reserve currency. 80% of the world's assets and debts are denominated in the dollar.
If I go to Japan and I pull out a $100 US note and I try to go pay for dinner, they're going to tell me to go F myself. If I pull out my Visa, they will say, "Thank you very much, sir. Charge it in yen," and it will subtract from out of my bank account in dollars.
Yeah, that's because you're paying a fee and the service and all that good stuff. Yeah. You're converting.
It's the exact app that you just described that you said isn't going to happen.
No. Okay. So, oh man. How do I explain this? There's a reason the dollar is a global reserve currency. Like I said, it is 80% of the debts and assets denominated in the world. The reason you use yen in Japan is because the government puts you in jail if you don't. Those barriers only exist because they're artificial. They are state barriers.
Do they? Is it illegal to accept a $100 bill as payment for something in Japan? Is that the truth?
No, to pay taxes, the reason that network exists is because of an artificial barrier.
But I don't pay taxes in Japan. I just pay for things. So I'm wondering,
is it about the acceptance of yen in Japan? Like you see it with like something like Venezuela. Like, so Venezuela, like their currency has gone to shit, but they still have to use it all over the place, even though it's absolute garbage, and they all desperately want to hold dollars because the currency is losing, like, what is it, like 20% a week or something insane like that?
How does this relate to, because so far what you've described is you've described a world where there are a whole bunch of different types of currencies, a whole bunch of different types of monies. And so we've been in this world for many thousands of years. So if what you're saying is that eventually we get to a state where there is only one money, how can we have so many different monies now? And why should we believe that Bitcoin, which is not money, is somehow going to be different in the way that, although we have many currencies now, that eventually we're going to get to one. And why will it be Bitcoin?
So the value of yen and yuan, like all these other like national currencies, I think I think the whole value of the dollar is you're looking at the Schelling point and the lagging effects of the gold standard. I literally think this is a 100-year unraveling of the gold standard. The dollar is a shit currency, just an absolute garbage currency. But because everybody keeps using it.
Compared to what?
Compared to gold. Like somebody could just print, like we just printed $6 trillion, in the last 6 months.
Can you buy groceries with the gold bar right now? Can you take a gold bar and buy groceries?
That's not my point. This is how gold. I'm talking about the monetary policy. I mean, we're strictly talking about monetary policy right here.
So a currency is what's used to purchase goods and services in a market.
Currency, yes.
Okay, so you said
when I refer to money, I'm talking
shit currency.
Okay. Dollar is a shit money. There you go. Okay. Concede. I got you there. So the currency is the thing that you actually use to trade. Money is the monetary policy and the soundness of that scarcity. Gold compared
to gold, you're saying compared to gold,
dollar is shit. It's fully trusted.
If the dollar is the shittier money,
mm-hmm.
I think the question should be shittier to whom, because we're not using gold backed anymore. We're using a fiat US dollar. So it must be less shitty to someone. And that someone seems to be the person who determines what we use.
Because that standard was established while it was on a gold standard. Because the dollar became the world reserve at Bretton Woods. And it was specifically because it was as good as gold, like the greenbacks. Like that's where that whole idea came from. And then all these central banks around the world just pegged to the dollar. And that is where that foundation came from. But the thing is the only reason we had international trade is because they were pegged to the dollar. Is because like the gold standard is what led to the greatest increase in wealth and prosperity throughout between about 1873-ish to about 1913 until the creation of the Fed. And, subsequently World War I, damn near 5 years later, and then roaring 20s and World War II. Like as soon as the money started to bleed out and become corrupt, the whole world went to shit. That is specifically because the world was speaking one monetary language. Then this is all about the specialization of labor and solving that double coincidence of wants problem we talked about. And I don't think it will be complete. I don't think it will ever be a situation where Bitcoin is just 100%. Everything is denominated in Bitcoin. I think there's always room. I think it's kind of an 80-20 rule for communication protocols, is that there's always an alternative. There's always kind of like a backup plan, I guess you could say, because there's never full trust in anything, particularly when we're talking about the digital world. Everything's could have a bug at some point. But to get the most efficient market, you just have to speak the same language. And in a sense, why is the
BTC rule set? What is it about the BTC rule set as versus say the BCH rule set that informs you and tells you that the 80% in the future is going to be that particular rule set?
What I was talking about before, the Lindy effect, the security, the ability to keep it decentralized in the long term, and to keep it independent.
The thing is, that's a lot of, so the Lindy effect, the security, the ability to keep it decentralized doesn't really mean anything. Those are three words, but they don't mean anything.
It does. So like to
me, they don't. First off, I got to be honest with you. I don't know what the Lindy effect is. I'm sure that that's something that circulates in the Maxi community as an important thing. Decentralization, that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It's not a word that's used in the white paper at all, not a single time. Right? So not
distributed. Yeah. Distributed is the word he used.
Yeah, but not decentralized.
No, I don't think so. Maybe.
So, and it's not. No,
I'd have to read it again.
No, all you got to do is pull up the PDF, do Control F, and type in the word decentralized, type in the word central, and you'll get all the variations of it, right? It's not used a single time. Okay. So like if you talk about, like you say, here's the rule set. BTC has this very specific rule set. BCH has a different rule set that fundamentally is not all that different. For the average transaction that you want to run, it's basically the same. In fact, you can use the exact same code, same wallet code to run both of them. So I ask you, why is BTC the one that is guaranteed into the future? Like right now, it's nothing.
Not guaranteed.
Okay, well, why then do you so firmly believe that it is the one that you are willing to say Bcash that's a signal?
I don't mean anything derogatory by that. Like
right?
I really don't. It's just habit. But yeah,
it's just habit because that's your church, right? So that's the way that you talk about in your church.
If Bitcoin failed the test that I put it through,
are the heretics, right? The people who left your church, you give us.
You're putting that on me. Maybe you got that as somebody else on Twitter, but you're talking to me.
Well, why do you use the term Bcash instead of Bitcoin Cash?
Because it's a whole lot of freaking syllables, and I've been calling it Bcash for a long time. Like,
Bitcoin Cash is 3 syllables.
Like I said, habit. It's habit. Like I said, it's habit.
Right, it's habit. But what I'm saying is, how does the term, what I'm describing to you is, of course it's habit. It's the same way that it's habit for soldiers in Vietnam to call Charlie as the enemy, or soldiers in Iraq to use the term Haji. Enemies have always had a pejorative nickname associated with them.
I really don't
You
care
use that
about
nickname because it's your church. So what I'm asking you is, outside of your church, how is the rule set of BTC so different from that of Bitcoin Cash, as an example, that you are sure that you had dedicated your full time, you said full-time Bitcoin, your full time to this rule set, that you are so tied into this rule set and the community around it that you even use their jargon in talking about other groups. So I'm asking you, what is it about this rule set that gives you the assurance that it's going to be the one?
Because it doesn't change all the time. Because it's not arbitrary. There's four main measurements. Censorship resistance.
Okay.
21 million. Decentralized.
Okay.
And you can validate the first 3.
And how is that not true on Bitcoin Cash?
Because somebody's just going to hard fork the network again in 6 months, and I have no idea whether or not that's going to actually keep things secure.
Well, no, you do. Because as we said, you don't have to follow a change that changes any of those 4 things. Because right now, those 4 things are true on Bitcoin.
But the community ethos is just to follow. Is to just do it.
Oh, it actually isn't. We just had a fork over this. That's one of the most contentious things I've ever seen in my life. And it was over minute. Let me tell you what it was over. It was so minute. The first one was about whether you change the block, the time. It was
about a tax, wasn't it? It was about a tax.
Hold on, let him finish, guy. Let him finish.
Sorry, I was confused.
First it was about a funding proposal that came from miners that miners wanted. But let me tell you, the second one that was even worse, that really created it, was there were there were going to be changes to the difficulty adjustment algorithm, right? Which is actually an arbitrary thing. On Bitcoin, it changes every 2 weeks. But when you have a coin that has less hash power, they changed it. So now it changes about every block. Now this is arbitrary. Satoshi could have put it in as every block, and changing every 2 weeks difficulty adjustment algorithm is not one of your 4. So this was something. But here was what split the community and got people so vitriolic that they were slandering people's character. Oh, it was terrible. Was one side said, we're going to do a difficulty adjustment algorithm, and this is the new one. The other side said, we agree with your difficulty adjustment algorithm. We're going to make one tweak. And the tweak is that we want to get the blocks. We had a mistake way back in the day. We want to get the blocks so that like 10 years from now, Bitcoin and BCH have very similar block numbers. And so we're going to do what's called drift correction. So for a few months, instead of 10 minutes, it'll be 11. right? This minor change. Now, for somebody, when you say something like the community ethos is just let's do any change. And then I look at the community and I see them going to war over the difference between 10 minutes and 11 minutes, to the point where the argument on the 10-minute side was this changes the fundamental incentives of Bitcoin. The difference between 10 minutes or 11 minutes for a few months, that community is not a community that's about arbitrary change. That community is a community that cares.
The problem is
describing is just wrong. So I ask you again, what is the difference in the rule set between BTC and BCH that assures you or makes you confident that you would go full time in support of your church and that you would devote your time and that you believe that it will be that in the future? What is it about that rule set?
Because they don't change. They're unchangeable.
So you don't think that there is
hold on a second. Let me answer your example. So you're right. It was a really contentious issue because they were changing rules. But that's exactly my point, is that the money should not be politically alterable, even if it's something stupid like that, even if it is something arbitrary, and be very concerned about the incentives for a 10 or 11 minute block or whatever the hell it is. But that I don't want to have to argue about that. I don't like we need a shelling point. Like, the rules need to be consistent. Like, the money needs to be sound. Let's build on top of it. But anything that alters the consensus, that alters the literally the private property rights and the security model and the consensus of the actual network, like the bedrock of this thing. Don't argue about it. Don't argue about it. I don't want to
private property rights. How has Bitcoin Cash altered the private property rights?
I'm not saying they have specifically. I'm saying that as soon as you enter into that level, you're arguing at the social level about those hard fork rules, about changing the consensus rules. That's on the table.
So the software that does not change. So for you say the software that does not change.
It does change. It does change. Like
the rules, the software,
software
has the rules that do not change. The consensus rules that do not change.
Yes.
Is, in your mind, is the metric by which, if you're making a bet on the future, you say that's what's going to win. Do I have your argument correct? If you're going to make a bet on what's going to dominate,
that is one of a handful, but yes, that is a critical part of it.
So my argument,
we don't make breaking changes to TCP/IP, right? It's been almost completely unchanged since 1978. I mean, there's done error correction and better ordering and better routing stuff, that sort of thing. But fundamentally, we've not hard forked TCP/IP. In fact, they've been trying to for 15 years with IPv6.
And but that's because we wouldn't be able to communicate with each other.
Exactly.
Anymore. Right.
Same is absolutely true of money.
But that's not true with Bitcoin. Because BCH exists, and I can easily communicate with a BCH node by changing my software. It's not like I have to go and get all new hardware, because my laptop relies on TCP/IP's protocol to be there because I've got hardware that's in there. It's not as easy as me upgrading a piece of software, which is exactly how you switch networks. Is you upgrade a piece of software on your node. That's it.
But everybody has to upgrade at the same time.
Well, no, everybody that wants to follow you. And not everybody has to follow you.
Sure.
And we know that not everybody will follow you.
Yeah.
Right? But anybody that wants to. And so my argument against so by the way, you're also making the argument that BSV makes. They say a set in stone protocol. We will make
that shit hard forks all the time.
BSV?
Yes. They were born of a hard fork.
Yeah, and there were hard forks in Bitcoin before as well. There were hard forks in BTC.
Yeah, and they're trying to make unlimited block size. Again, that's another. That's a whole nother thing.
But hold on. So
there's 100 other reasons why those guys.
So it actually isn't that it doesn't change. It's that it's your rule set. Because if I pick another rule set and then I say it doesn't change, you don't think that's valuable. So BSV, their whole thing is set in stone protocol, and they have actually rolled the rules back That was their whole thing.
In that instance, their rules really are stupid. And I'd say that with love for those.
So it isn't about not changing. Because
I said it's one of like a handful. It's like one of 5. That's a critical piece of the puzzle.
Let's move to the decentralized piece of this argument.
I wanted to get back to block size.
Well, I think that's been had. What does decentralized mean? First off, please define decentralized.
Oh man, see, this is one of those things. Decentralized is not. It's a spectrum. Decentralized is not an all or nothing thing. So, like, it really is. It is.
So then is centralized the spectrum then? If decentralized is a spectrum, then isn't centralized a spectrum?
Wait, what? No. It's if centralized, the degree of decentralization,
or isn't it the degree of centralization?
You can have a
half full and half empty. So it's a spectrum of full and empty. So I could say it's halfway full, or I could say it's 3/4 empty, or I could say it's a quarter. 3/4 empty is a quarter full. So halfway decentralized is halfway centralized. Well, it's a spectrum, right?
That sounds about right to me, guy.
That's how a spectrum works. Centralized is on one side.
You can't have a spectrum of decentralization and not have some sort of centralization if you're talking about it's on a spectrum.
That's fair. Yeah. I guess that's fair.
So can you define then centralization?
Okay, because centralization. We're talking. Let's go back to the white paper.
Let guy make his case.
Well, the white paper never mentions the word decentralization.
I know. I'm using a different example. They talk about confirming, like dealing with and creating a system of peer-to-peer cash that solves the trust problem. This is mentioned multiple times in the white paper, and he says without a trusted third party. Trusted third party is centralization. It means that there is a fault where one thing can go wrong and it can screw up everything. And you are relying on one central point.
Back up. I don't just want to let that go past.
Okay.
So say that sentence again. Decentralization is, because I think you just defined decentralization for us. Decentralization is.
Wait, what am I going back to?
You're going back to the last sentence you said. You said decentralization is
removing trusted third parties, removing as many single points of failure as possible within the system, and specifically in the context of Bitcoin, making it so that anybody individually can validate the entire rule set and they don't have to trust somebody else.
Okay, so decentralization in Bitcoin, let me repeat it back to you, is making sure that any individual can validate the entire rule set and they don't have to trust anybody else.
Yes, to make that as accessible as we can possibly do.
Okay, good. So any network where any individual can validate the entire rule set without the need for anybody else is sufficiently decentralized according to you.
Wait, say that again?
Okay. You said decentralization in Bitcoin is when any individual can validate the entire rule set without the need for anyone else. Is that not the definition?
Yes. We'll go with that. It's not so clean, but yes, we'll go with that.
Is there a clean? I mean, please pick a clean one, because if we're going to debate it, it'd be good to have for you to feel.
Again, there's so many different elements at play. Like I said, like everybody being on one client for Bitcoin is a risk, because essentially there's a single point of failure. That's why I actually like when people don't upgrade, is because it means we're not on the same version. And if anything has changed, then there's less likely that the whole network is on a bug. Decentralization is a critical prerequisite, but it isn't sufficient. It's not the end of the story. It's part of the puzzle. It's not that like, oh, if something is like decently decentralized.
Before you say decentralized again, can we please define what decentralization means? Because if you just keep saying a word, like you say, decentralization is important, but you don't tell me what it means, what you're saying, first off, the audience is lost. And second off, I can't debate it. I can't argue the point if I don't know what the hell you're saying. So can you please define decentralization? Like, what
does it mean to you? What does it mean to you? I want to hear your definition, and we'll see if it's different from me.
It doesn't mean shit to me. In the context of Bitcoin, it's a buzzword. It doesn't mean a goddamn thing.
So trusting, so just putting, so wait a second. So there's no fundamental difference between just putting your shit in a bank and letting them do your transaction.
No, stop. Satoshi didn't put it in the white paper. If decentralization as a concept was a key concept of Bitcoin, you would think it would be in the white paper. What is important and what Bitcoin does, it says it in the very first sentence in the abstract. A purely peer-to-peer form of digital cash would allow any two individuals to transact without the need for going through a financial institution. So what does Bitcoin do? It solves a massive problem. And the massive problem is, and Satoshi says it in the introduction, he says, everything here can be done in person with paper currency. He says paper currency is just fine to create a situation where I can buy Hotep Jesus's goods and services without going through a financial institution. I use a piece of paper. He says, fine, physical currency, that's fine. But, he says next, currently no solution exists to be able to do that over a communications channel. At the time, the only way I could do that on the internet was I had to go through PayPal, a bank, a merchant services, something. And so he says, we could do this with cryptographic signatures. And the old ways of doing it is you need to have a mint and there's potential double spending. Hal Finney had already figured that out, right? But he says, no, here's what we're going to do. We're going to create this system. And so what the decentralization is, so here's mine, right?
It's peer-to-peer.
Sufficiently decentralized. I'll tell you what it is. If I can purchase through an electronic communications channel something from Hotep Jesus, and I didn't have to go through a financial institution. He got it, it left from me, from my control, and it passed into his control in a manner where he felt secure enough in its value and in the ability for him to then move it on to the next person that he was willing to exchange goods and services with me. And that's what Bitcoin does. And so any network that enables me to do that, and there's a whole hell of a lot of them, by the way, thousands, is as decentralized as Bitcoin.
Now, see.
Okay, so I just define decentralization and the way that it's of value to me. So can you please define it for you?
If you have to trust someone else as to what the value of that token is worth, if you have to trust somebody else to confirm the monetary policy, if you have to trust...
Wait, what is Bitcoin's monetary policy?
21 million. 6.25 per block. Right now, until we get to 63, or not 63, 70.
So you're saying on Bitcoin Cash, that is not possible to do?
What do you mean, the validation, the trust? Yeah, that's what I've been talking about with the hard forks. With hard forks and altering the rules and entering attack vectors.
No. On the Bitcoin Cash network right now. On the Bitcoin Cash network right now, can I validate 21 million coins?
I'm sure you can, yeah.
Can I validate the 6.25 block award?
Sure.
Can I validate the validity of the transaction?
Yes, you can validate all the stuff. But the trend, the broader trend is like the rules have constantly changed. There may have been bugs in the last 6 months.
Have any of those rules changed? Have any of those rules changed in such a way that it took away the things that you just mentioned?
I don't know. It's what is it, like 2 weeks out of a hard fork right now? I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Like maybe in 5 months we find a bug.
No, you can just look at the software. The software has the rules in it.
I'm trusting the software to do the job. Again, like as soon as that code breaks, as soon as the consensus rules,
the developers of the software.
I'm trusting the developers of the software, and I'm trusting that's why it's so important that the rules don't change. Because if it survived for 12 years already, then I know there's very unlikely.
So you're trusting a third party?
I'm trusting the software that I run on my computer. I have to trust my computer. There are a lot of different areas.
Audit the software yourself.
Like we're just hitting truisms here. Like this is true of literally everything. I really don't think this is fundamentally useful for the conversation, because I'm talking about the fact that the rules haven't changed for 12 years and it has survived against all of the possible adversaries and in a live environment where anybody can enter and leave. And therefore, if I am running that software with those consensus rules, then even if I can't audit it, I at least know that it survived for 12 years. This is I can't confirm. Like I can't confirm that's the Lindy effect. That's exactly what I'm talking about. The Lindy effect.
And that is it. And I think that's wonderful, right? That like what we come to is I ask you why BTC, and you say because BTC is the like top one. It's the dominant one. It's the market leader. It's like me asking, why are you a Yankees fan? Well, because the Yankees always win. But that's just like me asking you, why the Catholic Church? And you say, go to Vatican City. They've survived. They've survived all of the attacks, the Catholic Church. They've fended off. They defended Europe. They're still around. Look how long they've been around. Look how rich they are. Look how many members they have. Clearly, the Catholic Church is the best. And I say, that's fine. And that's actually a really, really, really good reason to make a bet on a particular church. That it's like, if you want to bet on which church will be dominant 1,000 years from now, bet on the church that's dominant now. That's a very good bet. However, it's not a sure bet. And if you're someone that actually has studied and understands what made that church dominant in the first place, and you see that they have fallen off from that, and there is another small church that is coming up that has those things in it and is doing it right, you might want to leave. You might want to leave that other church. And so it's like, I think that we've gotten to the core of it. Like, this is what's great. And this is what I said from the beginning, is that like, it's all justifications. It's all justifications to say, 21 million and this and that and this. Really what it's about is BTC has the most, it is worth the most money. It's been around the longest. The core devs are the most experienced out of all of them and have the most experience. It has the most people writing books about it. It has the most people, you just interviewed Michael Saylor. It has the most capitalists spending money on it. It's the Yankees. That's a hell of a good reason to support BTC. Now, I've never been that person. You know what I mean? I've never been the guy who just roots for the team that it has been winning so far. That's not me.
I root for the team that can actually survive if the government comes after it. I want stateless money. I want sound money. And there's absolutely... If there's a social attack vector every 6 months, if we're just going to be changing the fundamental consensus rules, then I don't see, that's not security. That is not a good cryptographic system.
I would never be part of a chain or community that changed the fundamental consensus rules of Bitcoin.
That is what a hard fork is. That is literally what a hard fork is.
No.
We can argue about you just talked about it. You were just talking about it.
We'll change it.
That's a subjective term. If we're breaking the consensus rules, now we're just deciding subjectively at the social layer how much we think we should change the rules. That's the same thing as the Ethereum's minimum viable printing, or whatever the hell they call it, where their monetary policy is just whatever they think is useful at this one time. Like, I want to end the debate about what the consensus rules are, and
that's valid. That's dude. I think that is a valid position to have. What I would say to you is that understand that it is a preference that you have. There is nothing objective about that. It is a preference.
No, I think this is what actually gives these things, gives Bitcoin value.
You're allowed to think that. But understand that there are other people who think that perhaps there could be some changes that would make not only that would actually make, because everybody that I know that I'm associated with are just like you. They want stateless money.
Yep.
No one's more of a voluntarist than me, right?
I will challenge you on that. That is our next debate.
Right, but the thing is, you know where I stand on this. You know that is what's important to me. And so by the same token that you say, I believe we get there by not changing the rules at all. I say to you, I see some flaws in the current rules. And I believe that we get there by changing certain of these rules because it will allow more activity to come on in different ways, and that is how we get past the state. So all we're arguing about is we're arguing about two different paths to try to come to the same place. And it's the reason why
I can agree with that.
I think
we're arguing about two different paths.
But to get to the same place. So this was framed as Bitcoin versus altcoins. But I only work on Bitcoin. That's it. I only work on the Bitcoin protocol. That's how we're even able to have this discussion. I don't work on Ethereum. I think it's bullshit. I don't use Monero. I'll accept any of your coins, but then I trade them, and I trade them for stable coins that are on BCH. So even my stable coins, even the tokens that I use, utilize the Bitcoin protocol. And so what I am saying is we both want Bitcoin to win. What I believe is the software that is currently BTC cannot get there. That is what I believe. I believe it will be captured as it is being captured right now.
I don't think it's being captured at all. I think that's the exact opposite of what's happened. I think that's the exact opposite of what's happened. But that actually goes back to one of your earlier points, is that you're saying, like, again, we're kind of back to the VHS and Betamax, is that they look very similar, but there's just subjective differences about like how we think it's actually going to go about what this path is. Yes. And the idea is that these monetary protocols, like, this is why you land on the Schelling point, because any alteration of those rules is just subjective. There's no Schelling point outside of it. We could go to 1.5 megabyte blocks. We could go to 8 megabyte blocks. There's no clear answer, which means it becomes a social problem. It becomes a social argument. Now we're politically deciding what the rules are again. So I want one that ends that.
Somebody decides. Somebody always decides what the rules are.
No, the network as it is right now decides what the rules are.
A person writes the code.
A person wrote the code. The rules are there. The network is established. A person decides
to not change the code. A person decides to not change the code.
Well, and inaction leads them to be the same.
Correct. But at the end of the day, it's human action. I heard you're an Austrian. So it's like, at the end of the day, what's happening is human action. But inaction is also human action. Right? When you have a choice and you could make a change and you don't make a change.
Just like holding is using.
if you wanna say holding is using from that regard, you can. Right? You are participating. It's particularly using if you do the social thing, right? Mm-hmm. So like, there are plenty of holders who hold and then they pump Bitcoin and they're involved in Bitcoin because they would like to see their investment go forward. And they would like to see themselves earn more, right? The great thing about when you view this as two different paths trying to converge on the same thing, if we both believe that eventually one of these networks will be dominant, the wonderful thing about it is this. If it's BTC, guess what I'll be using? BTC. I'll be using Bitcoin. If it's BCH, guess what I'll be using? Bitcoin. If it's BSV, guess what I'll be using? Bitcoin. And guess what? That's a fucking win. That's a win.
I agree.
That's an absolute win.
As long as it's As long as you can defend the rules against an attacker, as long as like I'm able to validate, as long as it's censorship resistant, and as long as it is sound money, I just don't think, I think Bitcoin Cash and the vast majority of altcoins have already lost that through a lot of actions that they've already taken.
That's fine, right? That's totally fine. It's totally fine. And if the argument is like that,
sure, I agree.
That's it. So it's like, if you believe that, but the fact of the matter is there are many of us who don't believe that. And those of us who don't believe it because we're scammers. We don't believe it because we're ignorant. We don't believe it because we don't understand Bitcoin. We believe it because we have a different vision of how we get to the end point.
Now, I agree about that.
The best of intentions moving toward that vision.
Particularly with Bitcoin Cash, I agree with that, but I think about 99% of them, like of altcoins, are scammers. There was a huge opportunity to make a bukus of money, to be the one that made points on a digital screen and make absolute bukus of money. There's nothing about sushi coin that's anything but horseshit. And but I would love to get to we still haven't got to block size and the layered approach of actually building this thing out, because I think it's the only thing that's actually sustainable. And I think the scaling problem is a massive problem. It is an ocean. Okay, sorry.
I want to touch on. Thank you.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
Yeah, that's something I'd like to cover.
Too much to do.
Okay. So maybe I'll start with this one. A lot of this is informed. I'm just going to do a quick plug, Hotep. Hope you don't mind. I wrote a book a few years ago called Self-Ownership, The Foundation of Property and Morality. And it's an exploration of, it's sort of an expansion of Austrian economics, because although they talk about property rights a lot, and although they talk about ownership a lot, it's in all the literature, it's never, that property and ownership itself are never really defined. They just say property is that which is owned. But it's like, okay, well, then what does it mean to own? That which is owned and can be disposed of by the owner. That's pretty circular. So I wrote a book to try and flesh that out and see, is there some definition?
Doesn't Rothbard kind of dig into that, though? Go check. Beyond saying it can be disposed of, really not there, really not dug into from first principles. And we use the term self-ownership as libertarians, as Austrians and whatnot. And so this informed me that as I went and I looked to be able to do by first principles, to be able to say, what is ownership? What's the definition of ownership? That even a communist, even though they might say, I can't own land, I can't own private property, that at least we can agree about what it means to own in the first place, right?
Right.
So in so doing, I realized, now I'd already been involved in Bitcoin, obviously, for years. I realized you can't own Bitcoin. And you can't own Bitcoins. And the reason that you can't is for basically what we just talked about in terms of the structure of Bitcoin is a locked box that is then unlocked. So what I am able to do is I am able to alter the ledger. If I have private keys, I can send a transaction. That transaction will be mine. So basically what I have is I have permission to alter the ledger associated with a specific, let's say, chunk of data, right? But anyone that has that private key can do it. I have to keep that private key secret. Anybody that has it. But in addition to that, if someone were to be able to guess that private key, they could spend it. They could spend my coins. So for instance, and this is why it's different. We use the term ownership and then we use things like money or gold or something like that.
I mean, in the context of like individual control.
Oh, okay. So, but talking about individual control and ownership is very important. And when you talk about property, you've said property rights. So yes. Property rights, Bitcoin is not property. And as a matter of fact, we need to be very, very careful as it starts to be regulated and legislated that we don't call it property. We've already made some of these mistakes as Bitcoiners. It's a big mistake. And here's the reason why. Property, the government has a right to seize your property. the state has a right to seize your property.
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin cannot.
Illegitimate right, but sure.
Okay, they claim a right. They claim a right. And if we're going to allow them to legislate Bitcoin, which you do, by the way, every time you deal with a custodial exchange, or if you say, I'm going to buy some on PayPal, what you've basically just said is, I agree that the government should be involved in Bitcoin. Because PayPal is one of the most highly regulated and licensed companies that exist. So we better be real careful as we involve the government about saying, oh, the Bitcoin is my property. Oh, is it? Is it? Because the government has a long history of feeling itself very, that it legitimately can deprive you of your property. No problem. No problem, right? So here's why you can't own it. Because there is, in the chain of ownership, there is nothing in the chain of Bitcoin ownership that you can own. So a gold bar. Can you own a gold bar? We definitely behave as though you can own a gold bar. If someone comes into my house, steals a gold bar that I have, we say, yes, you own a gold bar. Can you own land? Communists might say no. In general, we have agreed you can't own land, right? Somebody comes on, I'm justified in shooting them, right? However, if you can guess, you can't own a number, and a private key is a number. The 256-bit number. Now it's a very large, or I wouldn't say it's not a large number. It's a long number. There's a difference, right? So it could be a long number that only is the number 1, right? So it's not big, but it's long, right? So it all has to fit within there. And it's very big. And as he said, like if you want to say it's atoms in the known universe for private keys, that's fine. It's however big it is, it's big enough.
Big. It's just a big ass number. Just
it's massively big. So, but anybody that could guess it could spend it. Now, here's the other part. If I take a picture, if I open up my safe at home and I take a picture of all the cash inside and all the gold, and I put it on, not to say that it's there, anybody, by the way, if I was to do that and I was to put it on Instagram, exactly 0 people would be entitled to spend my gold or to spend my money, nor could they. However, if I take a picture of a private key and I put it on my Instagram, that will be spent within, 35 seconds. And I
gotta say, pretty freaking quick.
And I have no recourse to it. Why? If I go to a court and I say the value in that private key was mine, I owned it, they will laugh me out of there. They will laugh me out of there.
Sure.
So when we say own, I own these Bitcoins, and then by extension say property rights plays a part in this. Property rights plays a part in this thing of Bitcoin. You have to first tell me, where is the property? What do you own? Because you can't own a number. You can't own a private key. You can't own the numbers that are the UTXO set. You certainly don't own the data that is the blockchain. What do you own? If you say you own Bitcoin, you say property rights are involved, what do you own?
I would say this is kind of a semantic discussion. Is that like the important thing about property is that it is inherently scarce. And this is the reason why money must also be scarce in order to actually be an efficient allocator of property. In the same sense that, like, if you have a car, you and I can't drive the same car to 2 different locations at once.
Hold on. Before you go, is property do you define property the same way that most Austrians do, that say property is that which is owned? In other words, can you
I mean it just in the sense that if I have control over something, I must exclusively have control over it at one time, because we can't eat the same sandwich and get fat off of it.
Can you have control over a number?
If I keep it a secret. Yeah.
Well, is that the same type of exclusive control as having see, that's
I think it is. Like that's why Hotep can move his coins, you can move your coins, and I can move my coins, but none of us can move the others.
Ownership. So, but that's not scarcity. A number can't be scarce. Right?
Just 21. The fact that the rules limit it to a cap of 21 million. Of course, the number isn't scarce. It's on 100,000 different computers of everybody running.
No. The private key is a number.
Okay.
Right? The private key is not. Numbers are not scarce, right?
Nobody has it written down anywhere else.
Well, hold on. Is the number 7 scarce?
No, probably a lot of people wrote it. Number 7's all over the place. I've probably got number 7 on my screen.
So you're saying that if it's written somewhere, and it's not just in your head, it's no longer scarce?
In the context of a Bitcoin key, like in the possibility space of what a key can be. I mean, you said it earlier. That's why it's secure, is because it's such a huge.
But we're not talking about secure. We're talking about owned and property.
Well, we're talking. My context is under control. Is it under your control? Are you the one?
So your property is that which is under your control?
Explicitly in Bitcoin? Yes.
I'm saying
what I quote unquote own, which will semantically say, okay, I don't really own it, but I am the sole person who is in control of it. As if, like, in the same way that I quote unquote own a sandwich that I ate, nobody's going to get nutrition out of that except for me. Like
except you actually can own a sandwich.
Well, yeah, but again, it's because I have exclusive control and use of it. Like I could still have a judge say that I don't own it, but I can still be the one who's holding it and eating it.
So if I'm able to guess your private, so let me give you this example, right? Okay. Let's say you're working on your computer at Starbucks, let's say, and let's say I've got a really good memory, right? And I just happen to walk by and glance, and you just, at that moment, you bad OPSEC, whatever it was, you popped up your 12-word phrase. And I've got a relatively good memory that I can remember it. I'm just like, oh, I got it, right? Or I was looking for a while over your shoulder while you were in your wallet, right? And you looked at your 12-word phrase, I got it.
That'd be a stupid thing to do.
It's very dumb. It's very dumb, but it's important to this point. If I go and spend that, did I steal it from you?
You now own you now have the secret. You now have the secret that I once was in my exclusive control and it no longer is. I would say you stole it from me because I want my coins, but at the same time, I was the stupid one that showed you my seed. And according to Bitcoin only works if you quote unquote own the secret, if you have exclusive control of the secret. And that's why it's an independent system. Because it doesn't care. It doesn't care about the social sphere. It doesn't care about the judge. It doesn't care whether it's you or me who's moving the coins. It cares about who has the secret. That's it.
So
that's what makes it an independent system.
The owner, you say, the owner is the spender. So whoever spends it owns it, not whoever has the key or whoever starts with the key.
Whoever has the new secret. When we both have the secret, we both control it. We both have the ability to move it. But if you move it to your secret, to a secret that I do not know, it's back under your control.
No. If we both have the private, if I know your 12-word phrase, your private key, right? I've got a list of them now. If I have your 12-word phrase, do I now own those Bitcoins?
You have control. You have as much control as I have.
Okay, so then by your definition, are we both owners now of the Bitcoin?
And maybe, again, that's why I just
it's kind of important to not be a maybe if you're going to then jump out to property rights, right? So if you're going to bring property rights in, it's actually really important that we define whether or not we both own it, because if we both own it, we both have a claim on property rights. So do we both own it at that point?
This is why this is what makes it an independent system. Because if we're talking about ownership, we're talking, the only way that a market works is that we get to trade and value with skin in the game in comparison to how much work it took, how much trade-offs I had to make for the things that we have exclusive control over. I honestly don't really care if we say it's owned
don't have exclusive control over the private key anymore. So what I'm wondering is
I know.
something.
Let me finish my point here. Is
Please.
that's the reason the market works. Like that's why prices exist, is because they respond to people who value the exclusive control they have over their house, over the things that feed their family and, you know, make their kids healthy and all of these things. And that if someone else took it from me, that makes my life poorer. That makes that ruins my security. It is my exclusive control. Whether or not I call that ownership, it's the exclusive control.
Well, that's property.
Bitcoin enforces it's private property. It's private property.
You just
Bitcoin.
So we know. So we got that right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to say what I'm arguing to you. I don't need to be told, and I think most of the people listening don't need to be told that a house is property. We don't need to be told that a car is property. We don't need to be told that a market works because we exchange private property. We know it. We live it. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is, can you own Bitcoin? And what you said to me is,
you can have exclusive control over it.
Okay, great. Okay. If you don't have exclusive control, do you still own something?
Well,
if ownership equals exclusive control, does not exclusive control, which would mean 2 people or 3 people or 5 people, does that now mean nobody owns it?
Nobody has exclusive control, therefore it's not going to be a good market mechanism. It's not going to be good money.
Because the question is, can you own Bitcoins?
But I don't understand how does this help?
Here's how it helps. Because you said that the property rights aspect at the beginning of this, you explicitly said the changing rules changes the property rights.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, what I just said to you is there are no property rights in Bitcoin. And the reason there's no property rights in Bitcoin is because there's no property in Bitcoin. And the reason there's no property in Bitcoin is because property is that which is owned, and you can't own Bitcoins.
Yeah, but that's a semantic distinction. Like, you would still say that I took your coin.
It's not a semantic distinction because it has real world consequences.
Yeah, it is, because we're still talking about exclusive control.
Your property. When a government comes and takes your property, or someone sues you for damages for something, and they take your property, when somebody, whether or not you own your house has real world consequences. Whether or not you own your car has real world consequences. Whether or not you own the money in your safe has real world consequences. And whether or not you can own Bitcoins has real world consequences.
All true.
So what I'm asking is, what if you say ownership equals exclusive control? If you are not the only person who knows your 12-word phrase, do you still own the Bitcoins at that address or addresses?
I own the secret.
But ownership is exclusive control, right?
Ownership is exclusive control. If it's
not
a secret,
if it's no longer a secret, would be information that is known by only one party, right? So when it ceases to be a secret, does the Bitcoins in that address all of a sudden cease to be owned? And if they cease to be owned, then the property rights no longer apply to them.
The property rights apply to the secret. That's it. That's the thing about Bitcoin, is that it is independent. It doesn't care about the person on the other side. It doesn't care anything about the other side. It could be a computer. It could be a computer that has the secrets.
But computers don't have property rights. Only human beings have property rights.
Sure. But the Bitcoin network, that's why I call it a system of independent property rights, because as long as you own the secret, you have exclusive control. That's what makes it digital money. That's what makes it unique among all of the other digital systems and ledgers and stuff that we've had.
There is property rights. See, because here's the difficult part. When you say property rights, you're talking about a human being. Only human beings have property rights. Computers don't own things. There's at least not yet.
It's an analogy to explain the ownership of the money, the exclusive control over the money.
Okay.
Like, I don't think it should be taken.
Who owns it then? Who owns
the entity who has the secret.
Okay. And that's
has
a person.
A secret.
Is that a person?
It doesn't matter. Like I said, a computer can be the one who has the secret, and Bitcoin doesn't care. Bitcoin does not care as long as you have the secret.
What value is a private key to a computer, and how does this computer get this private key if there's no human being operating the computer?
You can have a smart contract that's executed. Like you can have an independent key that's in the middle. Do what?
But somebody built the smart contract.
Sure. But you can have it automated.
I do it all the time, right? I have applications that generate private keys all the time.
Yeah.
Right. I own those. I own those machines. I have control over the private keys.
Yeah.
Right. So what I'm asking you, control.
Yeah.
Control. And so the question here is it's actually a very important question of whether or not you can own Bitcoins. Because if you can own them, they can be stolen. If you can own them, they can be taken from you. They can be added to your net value and taken from you by the state. The state can say it's a type of property that we can take. It's very important. And it's actually important that we get these words right because we're using them to write legislation as we speak.
Okay, if we're talking about legislation. Okay.
Well, what other reason is there to talk about property rights?
Because
what is outside of law or some
Bitcoin
custom
is extra national. It's in the globe. Like if the judge or the regime in my country doesn't like it, if they don't have my secret, doesn't matter. Bitcoin don't give a shit. Bitcoin only responds to the secret. It only responds to the key.
That's right.
Yeah. That's why it's an independent, stateless form of exclusive control. I call that property rights in a monetary good. But if we don't want to call it property for the sake of confusing the state or making them really antsy about wanting to come after it,
it's for confusing us. Because what you jump from is you jump to, now you get the digital gold meme, you get the monetary policy meme. And the thing is,
memes.
No, but they're important memes because you're using them all the time. Money is property. Money is a form of property.
Yeah.
Something that cannot be property then is not, if it's money, it's unlike any money we have ever known.
It is.
And if it's unlike any money we have ever known, why would we assume that it follows the same rules as all of the other money we have known?
Because it's still a communication protocol. It still holds value in the unit that it is defined as. It's just an abstraction of it. It's like paper money. It's like paper money still attached to gold, except that you know exactly what the rules are. The rules of gold are even stronger. They're explicitly 21 million. Like imagine if we just went to paper money and we were still on a gold standard, and let's say for some reason.
Can you own paper? Can you own paper?
Again, we're just talking about exclusive control here. Like, can you own a point?
Can you have exclusive control over a specific $100 bill? Can you have exclusive control?
Yes.
Can you have it? What?
Yeah. Yes.
And a gold coin? Can you have exclusive control over a specific gold coin?
Yes, I used to have a bunch.
If you have exclusive control over a specific gold coin, you have a gold coin in your hand. And I am standing on the other side of the room. Can I have that same gold coin in my hand?
No, it's not digital.
It's not digital. So I can own. So if you have a copy of the latest Drake track, it's digital. Yeah. And I have a copy of the latest Drake track. Do you own Drake's music?
No, I don't have exclusive control over it. I mean, I have a file on my computer or whatever, and I have programs and stuff like that, so I can use them. But no, I don't own it in the sense that I can't keep somebody else. I mean,
I'm starting to see where Vin's going with this.
Do you have any property rights whatsoever to Drake's music? Beyond the property rights that you have to your laptop that you're using to play the file?
No. I mean, this is the whole. This is BitTorrent, this is because there's nothing specific.
It is BitTorrent. It is BitTorrent. You're exactly right. It's a distributed communications network. Mm-hmm. You don't own anything on BitTorrent. Neither do I. I have no property rights associated with any of that data. None. And I have no property rights associated with anything in a Bitcoin network.
You have rights defined by the consensus rules. I mean, you don't have to call them property rights, but they are exclusive.
The network will react in a certain way if I send certain data to the network.
Yes. And they are rules about who has exclusive control over the money, about who has exclusive control to update this ledger. Money is just a tally.
Yeah, that's good.
Money is just a tally system. It's just a tally system to keep track of property in the real world. It's only been that we've had a good sound money that was also a physical thing. Now we've found a way to abstract that role and create the same set of exclusive rules that gold provided in a digital sense.
No.
Yes.
No, we have a distributed ledger. Okay.
Yes.
We have a ledger. The value that we ascribe to the things on that ledger is external of the ledger. And you know how you know this? Because when I ask you, I'll tell you how you know this. What's the price of Bitcoin?
In dollars?
Well, it's funny that you would ask that. What's the price of Bitcoin?
I don't know. It's like 19,000. But you have to compare it to something else.
Well, it's 19,000 what?
Dollars is
right.
Example.
And so when we ascertain the value of the Bitcoin network, we do it with something that is external of Bitcoin.
Well, what's the price of a dollar?
A dollar?
No, what's the price of a dollar?
Because a dollar is money.
It's the exact same thing.
Because money has three. No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Money.
How many dollars is how many whats? Like it's just because it's the Schelling point. It's just because it's got the largest network. That's the only reason. But it's the kilometer. Like
no, you don't denominate in money, right? If I go to Mexico and I say, "What's the price of 1 peso?" They're going to tell me 1 peso. If I go to Germany and I say, "What's the price of 1 euro?" They're going to say
it has a value. Like you can't just like have like if you don't have 100 pesos, you can't go get something that costs 100 pesos.
We're talking about
value is comparative.
Money and currency, both. When you're in the place where that money is used, the money is the final, and that's because it's a unit of account. So money it's 3 attributes, right? Or 3 applications, I should say.
Okay.
Right? It's the medium of exchange, it's the store of value, and it's the unit of account. Now it has to be all 3, because if it's not money. So if I go to you and I say, "What's the price of
large network money?" Yeah.
If I go to you and I say, "What's the price of milk?" You're going to give me the price denominated in money. And if I ask you, "What's the price of that money? What's the price of $1? You're going to say $1 if you're in the US. Anybody, go on the street and ask. That's what it's going to be. But when I say, "What's the price of Bitcoin?" no one ever says back, 1 Bitcoin is 1 Bitcoin. There are some goofy maximalists who do it.
I was about to say, that's a pretty popular meme.
Except for the fact that those are the same maximalists who are like, "It's all-time high now, guys. Bitcoin is the
way to hold the fucking phone. Hold on a second. So you're saying that nobody gives a shit about the price of any of those altcoins or anything? And is it something special about Bitcoin?
No.
There's nobody who doesn't go, "Woohoo, the fuck who," when they make $2.
No, I agree with you. None of them are money, because none of them are unit of account. And money has to be all 3. And I will tell you that actually we know now that Bitcoin will never be unit of account. And the reason that we know is because of Tether. Tether. Because Tether was released. Tether is Bitcoin, by the way, for people who don't know that. The original Tether was released.
It's got a completely different monetary rule. Like monetary.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
Monetary rules are 100% different. The tether is just dollars. It's the dollar monetary.
Hold on.
What defines
Tether is Bitcoin UTXOs on BTC. Sure. It was released on BTC using the Omni protocol. Tether moves as a Bitcoin transaction, which tells you, but you can assign any value that you want. So what you have now is you've got BTC, that the amount of BTC, the amount of Satoshis that's holding $2.4 billion worth of tether on BTC is like worth $1,000. But you can price those UTXOs at 2.4 billion because that's the tokenization. And the reason why you would want to do, and then you can use them to buy BTC, which is crazy. That's what they did. That's what people don't understand. That's the game with Tether. You can take Tether, you can take $5 worth of BTC, turn it into $1 billion worth of Tether, and then use it to buy $1 billion worth of BTC. That's why Tether works. And you can do the same with Ethereum, with the ERC20. And you can do the same with BCH now with the SLP token. And the reason they do that is because the dollar is money. Bitcoin is not.
The dollar is the dominant money right now.
For 500 years. So if we're going by your thing that let's go with the one that's lasted for the longest, the dollar has been a unit of account for 500 years. Bitcoin has been a unit of account for 0. Yes, 500 years.
Yeah, but
the word dollar is in the U.S. Constitution.
Again, we're talking about monetary policy. Like as I said, it's got an absolutely awful monetary policy. It's imbalanced. It's corrupt. It's politically manipulated. It's being used to control other people. It's the exact opposite.
And nobody cares. So
it's
why
one
do they want
giant trusted third party. I don't give a shit if they don't care. If they don't care, I'm going to use Bitcoin because it's independent, because it's stateless, and they are going to continue to care because it's continuing to lose value. It's lost 20% this year.
But you're not using Bitcoin as your money.
Yeah, I am. I use it all the time.
No, you're not using it as your money, because what you use as your money is your unit of account. So when I asked you, what is the price of Bitcoin? And you responded back to me with money.
Yes, the dominant measuring system right now
is money.
So money, this is an order of operations here. We're talking about the monetization of a new good. This shit is not a light switch. It takes hundreds of years to really do that historically. When we're talking about like gold, shit was 1,000 years before you could really call it money. And with the dollar, with anything, the only boost that they get is the fact there's some sort of a country or government that.
So how long will Bitcoin take?
I don't know. We've never seen a digital monetization of a good, but it's certainly not liquid enough. It's certainly not liquid enough to price.
I got
things
a question.
Yet.
Guy,
Yeah.
do you see Tether as threatening Bitcoin as becoming that money?
No, not at all. Because if I think Tether is a risk, then I think the dollar is a risk, and I don't think so. I think Bitcoin is an order of magnitude improvement over the corruption, the centralization, and the horrible trust needed in government money.
So how long will
this is an
how long will
independent.
Bitcoin
I mean, if you want to just throw out numbers, I'm looking at 2 to 3. 2 decades probably on a monetization event of how Bitcoin, I kind of put it on the same timeline as the internet. When did the internet become completely ubiquitous? When did we put enough layers on top of the thing that you could actually stream Netflix and go fuck your cable company? And that was 20 to 30 years after the web existed. I think we're only touching Bitcoin's web moment. With basically the Lightning Network, I think right now is unbelievably promising. I use it every day. And now I've got a Sphinx tribe or whatever that's streaming sats. People are paying me by the minute to listen to the show voluntarily. I don't like charging. But so there's some really amazing potential there. And it doesn't have any of the constraints of the script or whatever that Bitcoin does, because it's a payments layer off chain. You basically can, program whatever you want. You can do the application layer. You can do all of these other things that will come on top of it. So I think this is a 20-year probably, because we're just getting started. We're just bootstrapping this thing, but I think it only works if we have a strong foundation of a money that cannot be contested, and one that won't break when China puts up their firewall, and that there's not this huge bulkhead of data that needs to be synced. I mean, this is like going back to all the different aspects of why I think Bitcoin is the one that truly has the lead for a good reason. I don't think it's arbitrary. And if those rules, if the characteristics of it that I think make it secure and independent, and the decentralization, I'm getting to the definition of this. The fact that it is widely validated by everyone means that there's no central point, where there's no central trust in what those consensus rules are and what that monetary policy is. And Bitcoin is about removing that trust, about having a monetary policy and a new digital monetary asset that you can have exclusive control over, not own, I guess, that enables the ability to have a market, a global market that nobody can actually control, that is just everybody freely joins, permissionless, and that the rules are simply static. The monetary policy is static, and all we do is defend it. The only alterations we make are to make sure that that monetary policy doesn't change. We don't enter it into the social layer. It does not become a political fight. What we do is we build on top of it, and we extend it into all the things we need it to do. I think this is the Unix. As Unix is to the internet, Bitcoin is to the new financial system. And I think if it's not a bedrock, you don't fuck with the kernel. You just don't constantly change those consensus rules, because I think that's a fundamental loss of security. I think that's a fundamental problem, and it enters all sorts of it enters it back into the political space as to, what are we going to argue about? The rules are supposed to be, and there's no Schelling point. It's like 2 megabytes is arbitrary. 8 megabytes is arbitrary. It's like, and it doesn't even solve the scaling problem. It does nothing to solve the scaling problem. Like it will never scale at the base layer. You gotta have fees. Fees are absolutely 100% inevitable. In fact, it won't survive if it doesn't have fees. Like that's the security model. One day the inflation rate will go to zero. Well, technically never zero, but it will drop so low that if we're not paying for the block space, if there's no market for block space, the thing it's not even secure. So there's a shit ton of reasons, but I just don't see anything that compares to Bitcoin in those explicit, in those categories. And I think most of them don't even, if you ask 90% of them, Bcash is different, I will say, or Bitcoin Cash, my bad.
Be careful.
They actually,
that's how ideologically possessed you are. You can't.
Oh God. Is that they at least adhere to the 21 million. But shit, altcoins don't even seem to care about the monetary policy. They don't even realize that that's the bedrock that I think we're laying out here.
If I could just, perhaps I could let you go on, but it's like, I think that taking the last 3 minutes of you talking is absolutely fascinating. And this is just an observation.
I agree.
Yeah, it's just an observation that I'm going to make, that it's like, I know that you disagree with the idea when I say, and I've been saying this for a long time, and many people have said it, I've spoken about it, I've written about it, about Bitcoin being a religion. And it's actually a big part of my next book. And I think that Bitcoin being a religion is actually a good sign. Like a lot of people push back on that, but I'm like, if you want to bet on a system of human organization, something that looks like a religion is probably a good idea. Something that will last for a long time, something that people will adhere to and just follow because it's the thing to follow. But what I find fascinating is the last 3 minutes of what you said, and I'm sure Hotep Jesus, that having had these Bitcoin debates and having had BTC maximalists on, it's verbatim. It's a verbatim script. Like it's a talking point script. That there's nothing new or nuanced. It's the exact same thing that every maximalist says. And I love Jordan Peterson. He was the first one that I heard say this, and I thought it was right. He says, you can tell when someone is ideologically possessed because you know exactly what they're going to say next. And like, here's the thing. I think it's not a bad thing as someone who works in Bitcoin and who's paid in exclusive, I mean, all of my income has been cryptocurrency for years now. So as someone who that's the case, and most of it Bitcoin, as a matter of fact, a lot of it BTC, right? So as someone that's the case, the idea that there are adherents, that we've reached that level where we have talking points and people adhering to it is a really bullish signal for Bitcoin, like really bullish. And the fact that people would devote their lives to spreading the talking points is a really good signal, right? There's nothing new. Like what you said in the last 3 minutes, you haven't added anything new that hasn't been said by any of the maximalist thought leaders for years.
So do you suggest that it doesn't mean anything? It's
No.
all just arbitrary?
Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite, right? If I'm going to bet on a religion, like we don't see people doing this for Ethereum. Notice that. We don't see people who do that. There's no talking points in script. And guess what? Bitcoin Cash has it too. Like you go and listen to Roger Ver and then you go and listen to people who talk about Bitcoin Cash. It's a little bit of a different script because it's about like payments and low fees, fast. What is cheap, fast, cheap, reliable transactions. You'll hear that over and over and over in the Bitcoin Cash community, right?
And they will give up trust to get it.
That's what you say, right? But it's like, and that's the response back. But at the end of the day, it's a talking point, right? So it's like
a talking point to explain something real that happened.
But it's a talking point to explain why you hold your position, right? Which is good. It's good. It's good to have zealotous adherents. It's good to have people who are so bought in to a concept that they will devote their lives to go full-time Bitcoin, to do 600 episodes of podcasts, to do all of this. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of energy involved. Who will write books, who will do the whole thing. You have to believe in something very strongly to do that. And the fact that you believe in it strongly is what gives Bitcoin its value. Because as a matter of fact, it's what gives the US dollar its value. In God we trust. It's the fact that I believe that if you hand me that $100 bill, I have full faith that I can take that a year from now, 2 years from now, or 2 minutes from now, down to someone else who I've never met before, and I can give them that, and they will exchange to me at basically the same amount. They know how much it is too. But that comes from years and years and years of us, but it's only because we believe it. So when I see the level of belief to where someone would come on and with no shame, and you shouldn't have shame. Like, I believe in Bitcoin too, but with no shame would just say talking points that are just things that they've heard and read from other people and devote their life to that. I am bullish. I am bullish on Bitcoin. This is the real thing that Bitcoin is. This is the alien thing that it is. This is the philosophical thing that it is. This is the new organizational structure that it is that will allow us to build a new world because we're already building the church.
And man, like I get like.
Let's move into closing comments here.
Okay.
That was my closing comment. I think it's by the way, I think it's wonderful, and thank you for hosting this debate.
No problem. I enjoyed it.
Okay. So those are your closing comments?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we're rolling over. Okay. Okay, I guess we're back to Bitcoin versus altcoins. So, if...
it doesn't have to be that. Your closing comments can be anything.
Okay.
I'd like you to put a cap on some of the things you disagreed with and agreed with tonight, just to put a nice little cap on things.
Alrighty. I would say what I'm passionate about is liberty, is the fact that it's self-ownership. There's that word again. But it's the fact that we actually cooperate and that we have a system that forces us to have a legitimate market. And I think that's what Bitcoin is. I think Bitcoin is a monetary system that defines an exclusive right and exclusive control over a monetary unit that can be used to facilitate and build an economy on top of it. And I mean, you can call it a religion, but it's a communication protocol. I mean, you can say TCP/IP is a religion, but it doesn't change the fact that TCP/IP is a communication protocol, that the internet cannot exist unless we are all speaking it. And that the fundamental reason why we use one versus another is because of the trust and the reliability in that thing continuing to operate in the way that it has operated. So if I think in the context of, let's go back to the context of Bitcoin versus altcoins, if the Lindy effect, if the idea that it has continued to exist in this explicit set of rules and it has continued to secure itself in spite of adversaries, in spite of anybody trying to attack bugs or break keys or find a weasel their way around the rules, if the security and the definition of the monetary policy in the system, if the long-term sustainability of that system, that it will continue to be easy to validate, that its security model will remain as it is today, if it continues to be censorship resistant, if the network effects, both in the value accrual, that's one thing I didn't even get to talk about actually, was that you can't, one of the reasons why these networks converge on one, money actually has far more of these network effects than merely language or something like TCP/IP, because you can use multiple protocols at the exact same time, but you can't hold value in both at the exact same time. Value must be held in one place because it is naturally an exclusive thing. So if you hold $1 worth of value, again measuring sticks, in Bitcoin versus an altcoin or versus the dollar or versus the yuan, whatever it is, then you are explicitly doing it at the cost of those. And the dominance of Bitcoin, or the dominance of whatever it is that becomes the Schelling point in the new economy, only accelerates because of that. And that doubles down the fact, like just like we have TCP/IP as the dominant communication protocol, the dominant monetary protocol will actually accelerate faster than something like TCP/IP, because the trade-off, the cost of not holding the dominant one, will actually continue to increase for every new person that actually adds to the network. And if the unchanging foundation, if all of this stuff doesn't actually matter, if the fact that it's a solid bedrock for a new financial system that can't be corrupted, if all of that shit just doesn't matter, then okay, I would think that a lot of altcoins would probably have a chance that we'd have a world where there's a crap ton of coins and everybody's got their own token and we're using 10 different monies. But I think that not only matters, I think that's basically a subset of the most crucial things that make Bitcoin valuable. And therefore, I really don't think altcoins have a long-term sustainable place.
We're gonna close out. If y'all got questions, super chat now. We about to get out of here. So a question came in for you guys, said, how do you account for human error and lost passwords?
I mean, that's that's the thing. If it's lost, it's lost. If you don't have, if you somehow lose your private key, it's gone. If there's human error all the time.
Can't change the rules to, hope people don't. I mean, they have to learn how to live in the environment. You can't change gravity if somebody falls off a cliff.
Right? I mean, it's just like if you burn an environment $1 bill, right? If your wallet falls, if you've got, a wad of cash and it somehow falls into a bonfire and it burns up, it's gone. In this case, it's not actually gone. It's still on the blockchain. It's just sitting there, and
nobody got that secret.
Yeah, we will actually reach a point at some point where, since there won't be new coins being created, that actually the amount of actual Satoshis that are in human control, where people know the keys to get them out, is going to steadily start decreasing over time. And so effectively, we'll actually wind up with less and less and less and less Bitcoins on any given network. You can always fork off another network and start it up again. But yeah, or start from a new Genesis block. But eventually with these networks, as they age and the incentive goes away, that's what's going to happen. And except you've got tokens, you've got token protocols, so you can add more value, just like with Tether. There's literally no limit to the amount of value, and Tether has proven that. There's literally no limit to the amount of value that the Bitcoin network can store. It's an arbitrary amount. So 21 million doesn't actually necessarily mean anything, except.
Well, I would say that something like you're totally right about the whole, like, if you lose your keys, it's done. Like, that's just how the rules work. But I would say that the tokens themselves don't actually add any value to Bitcoin. Like, the Tether value is not trapped in the Bitcoin unit. Like the network effect of the money is separate from whether or not it's being used for another token. It might make it more likely that you are then using the money as well. But like Omni is actually a great example. You talk about, like, Tether was originally released on Omni. Well, there was nothing keeping Tether to Omni. They were paying fees on Omni. They're on Ethereum now. I can't remember exactly where Tether went, but basically one day they just were up and like
Ethereum. They moved to
Ethereum.
Several $1 billion on Omni still.
Yeah, well, if you've seen that volume, like, Omni has gone into the shitter after like Tether left. But that was the thing, is that, like, none of the value is actually captured in the Omni token.
But there's nothing preventing you from making a Omni token. Nobody does, because Omni is a pretty shitty protocol for nowadays when you have ERC20. But like, there are SLP tokens, which is kind of an upgraded version of shares a lot of Omni things on BCH, and there are tokens that have their own value. So I think with Ethereum, you see on CoinMarketCap that they will list an ERC20 token as completely separate, but there are ERC20 tokens that trade and have their own value, that have nothing to do with any outside value. They're not tied to it like a backed stablecoin, and so I think that we would have to say that value is part of the Ethereum network. It's nothing but a smart contract on Ethereum that people have decided has some value. So when we look at the ETH market cap, that's not actually all of the value that moves on Ethereum. But that's like saying that, like, all the stock value in the NASDAQ is part of the dollar, but like, you don't, like. No, it's saying it's all part of the NASDAQ. So like, NASDAQ has its own stock, right? That, like, you can buy, that's on there, that's on their own exchange, and that's.
We're talking about the index, because like the value of the NASDAQ company is not the value of all the other companies.
No,
like
exactly. But that's what I'm saying, is that, like, Ether is just like gas, right? Like, it's and the same way when you use an SLP token on BCH, which is what all of my businesses now are all tokenized. We don't use any of the native token. So we use only exclusively SLP tokens, which is like the version of Omni. And you can add, the fact of the matter is, like, it really is there that, for instance, Spice, there's a Spice token. It's got a market cap. But the market cap of the actual tokens, the Satoshis that are holding the UTXOs, maybe it's a few $100s, but the market cap is, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars or something like that. But that's not added. That's considered a separate token, even though it exclusively moves on Bitcoin Cash, right? And so it's like, these are early emanations that tell us, like, in the same way that Lightning Network has proven that, hey, well, payment channels, we use them too, right? Like, payment channels are awesome because it's a way for you to do transactions and change your balance between that is not happening on the chain. That's awesome. But it doesn't add any new value to Bitcoin. Like, the only value that can be in Lightning is a reflection of the value on Bitcoin. What I'm talking about is creating a token that then people ascribe value to, but it only moves on a Bitcoin network, and it exists. So this is actually happening. So, like, the value of Bitcoin is not stuck at 21 million. This is just like a fact, like, of what the 21 million exchange rate is to the dollar. That's not the real market cap.
We got another one here. Halawe, thank you. Big Elvis, the Chef Rosenberg, said, I haven't taken notes yet, but I might. This is that good. Big Elvis also said, I've made the argument that Bit versus Altcoin is AI, and we are possibly living in some sort of reality generating machine, and the equations that are being solved are just reflections of master AI superhuman that creates our reality. FYI, I have 2 bits. AJ.
Hey, by the way, that is like that sounds crazy, but it's actually pretty intuitive. There's a lot of smart people who think that I don't personally have the math skills to really explain why it's the right thought that he has, but I think there are a lot of very genius mathematicians and physics people who say we're probably in a simulation. So yes, this is probably a simulation running on a computer.
AJ Bazzarelli, $4.99. He said, "Have fun staying poor Bitcoin until I die." Halawe S, $5 super chase said, "Takeaways: religious fervor is good. Number 2, control of your keys. Allow Bitcoin transactions. You don't own Bitcoin. 3, decentralization equals no third party."
Those are great takeaways. If somebody took that away from this, that's pretty good. I think that's a great starting point.
And also that Vin has the best cleavage in the room.
A lot of it is just shadow. So don't. It's a lot of it's shadow.
Yo, thank you both for coming and doing this, man. It's always like a college classroom for me. I get to learn so much. You know what I'm saying? I'm running coinbitsapp.com. As you already know, buy Bitcoin automatically, set the amount, set it and forget it. Stack your sats. You know what I'm saying? Stack your sats. But yeah, thank you. Make sure you tune in with these guys. Their links are in the description box below, so you guys can follow them, pick their brain, keep up with what they're doing in this space. And appreciate everybody for tuning in. And once again, thank you, gentlemen, for joining in on this.
Yeah, man, good time.
Thank you, guy. It was great.
Dude, good hanging out, Ben.
All right, man.
All right, I'm waiting to stop the stream now.